hopefully not here for CIT, and that you're hopefully here for the manager training module number 2. And we should have a nice group of supervisors here. I would ask that you throw as many rotten tomatoes at me as you can today. No, I'm just kidding. What we have said is that we put these series of trainings together really on feedback from all of you, that some helpful supports on management and understanding how to process through things would really be helpful. Some folks have said they didn't always feel prepared. And so while we know you didn't get this when you were first management staff at Western Tidewater, some future staff are going to get it as their very first thing. And there's no sense in having a bunch of seasoned managers not have the same kind of basic curriculum, and for you to share with us your own thoughts. So as we go through some of this work, feedback is great and welcome. This is the first run through this that we've done here. And so you're the 5th cohort here that I've done for this segment, but feedback has been great from folks to say, oh, have you thought about this? Could you do this different? Things kind of like that. So just keep that in mind. I'm open to all that. You'll get my slides that I'm going to go through today. As soon as I'm done, hopefully I'll remember to send the email right away. And then Charlene's been great about following up with some of her stuff. So she's your second presenter. We saved the best for last, so you'll actually get a lot more fun conversation with Charlene after you suffer through some time with me. And I should probably also say I'm Brandon. I'm our Associate Executive Director. If we haven't met in person, I apologize. My bachelor's degree is in psychology, and my master's is an MBA in healthcare management. And I've been here at Western Tidewater the last 19 years, I guess. I think so. We'll be at I think July starts my 20th. I think is where it is. So that means that I get to retire with full VRS at age 54, which I'm pretty excited about. But anyways, so I'm informal during presentations, so please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to give you guys some time to interact. I'm going to try to make some of the more boring stuff that, they said, hey, you've got to cover this stuff. We're going to try to make that a little bit more hands-on so that it's not like a snooze fest. Do my best. And if you've got questions, ask them. If you've got comments, ask them. We're all here to learn from each other, okay? All right, thanks for your grace about being a little bit late. Really do appreciate that. So this is Administrative Leadership Module number 2, as the slide says. A couple of things that we will go over today. These are the things that I was told I was supposed to talk about. And so I'm going to do my best to stay on point. We're going to talk about some basic administrative duties and expectations. So we're going to go through the handbook and talk about orientation. We're going to talk a little bit about structuring and documenting supervision. We're going to talk a little bit about the attendance policy. Why the handbook and the attendance policy in this section? Well, handbook serves as a really great place to kind of start orientation with staff. And so I want to walk through a couple of nuances that are in there, and that'll help us talk more about orientation in general. And attendance policy gets people in some jams here. And so understanding our attendance policy, what's expected, how we use it and leverage it as managers, an important kind of thing to go through. We'll also talk about employee, client, and productivity. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about what each one of those are and how do we look at them and what are some things that are our responsibilities. We'll also talk about tearing down silos of excellence, though that's going to be short. Amy covered some of that in Module 1 around silos. I'm not going to bore you all to death. I have pictures that I liked in the slides. I've told every group this. I just want to show off the pictures and we'll move on. Leveraging a SWOT analysis. So if you haven't done a SWOT before, it's not when you send the police to somebody's house and mess with them. But a SWOT analysis is kind of taking an overall look at your program or a portion of your programming and then understanding the internal and external influences that will shape how you make a plan going forward. And the last thing is we'll talk a little bit about management philosophy and leadership style, which will blend into a lot of really good stuff that Charlene got for you later today, okay? We will probably be here till about 1. I'm going to do my very best to have my section finished up by 11. We will take a probably 5-minute break in there somewhere so we can get up, stretch our legs, all that kind of stuff. And so if you're feeling like you need to start that like sooner rather than later, or I forget to do it around 10-ish, 10:15, just let me know and we'll go ahead and do that, okay? Any questions? So we're going to start with the employee handbook. I've got copies of it for you here. We used to have this handy dandy thing printed in a pretty little booklet that we handed out to staff. We have it posted online now. Sarah and the Cracker Jack HR staff are going through and revising some of it as we speak, I believe. But this is posted on the SharePoint. It's accessible to you and your staff anytime. when you get my slides, the picture of the handbook is actually a link directly to the SharePoint, so you can click on that. It'll take you right to it. You don't have to search for it. You can also type the employee handbook in the search function on SharePoint. It'll take you right to where you need to go. Did I pass enough of them back? All right. So what we're going to do is it's going to be a little bit of a scavenger hunt. I'm going to give you some things I'd like you to find in the employee handbook. When you find it, raise your hand. I'm going to make you read 5-6 pages, maybe a sentence, give us something, and then we'll have a little discussion about that and why I picked that section right there. Okay. Our very first one is the grievance procedure. So you can find a section in that employee handbook for the grievance procedure. Yeah. All right. Page 8. What does it say in there?
Grievance is the process through which non-probationary employees may bring their concerns to upper level of management. All grievances must be initiated within 30 days of action or event challenge. The full policy may be viewed in the WTCSB personal policies and procedures manuals located in that 24.
Yeah. Perfect. So Brandon, why talk about the grievance procedure? The goal of any good manager is that you never have to engage in the grievance procedure, right? Like that you've resolved all your issues with your staff before it would ever get to that. Grievance is kind of that formal means of trying to resolve something where somebody felt like they were treated unfairly. And the reason I put it in here is because most of us don't ever try to go take a look at it. But the last thing you want to do is learn what the grievance procedure actually says when somebody's filed a grievance. It's kind of like, the first time you get up to play baseball, I coach some kids in baseball, and I never send them out to the plate to swing a bat for the very first time in a game. We do that in practice, right? We take some time, we spend a little bit of time in practice, and then that way they don't feel so on the spot when they get up there to do it in a game. Same thing with management and this kind of stuff. We want to make sure that we're doing that ahead of time. So what I recommend to folks is that you do take a look at it, just read through it. It's confusing. It's a lot of legal words and things like that aren't super easy to read and understand. And it gives you some familiarity with it. So when you do get to that point, it'll seem a little fresher to you. It'll seem a little more familiar. And you'll understand what the purpose of it is. Because somebody might say, I want to grieve, this action you took. And then you can say, well, there's some informal steps we can take before we get into that. And you have to go through the whole timeline for you and for us. Tell me what the problem is. So some of those informal actions. It's also good to have that as a discussion with whoever your leader is, whoever your director is. If you hear complaints from staff, that's a really good time. Make sure you get whoever you're reporting to involved in that conversation and maybe see if we can't help to mitigate some of that down. So that's not the whole grievance procedure, obviously, just a little snippet in the book. That's the way the employee handbook is set up. Gives you a little piece of information and tells you where to go to find the rest, right? That's what we're after. And so when we look at that handbook, it really is just kind of that first introduction for a staff to some of our policy and procedure, help get them started. It's great to sit down with a new staff and use that as a guide to talk about a few of these things. You might even hit on the grievance procedure and say, hey, I just want you to know there is a grievance procedure. It's posted online, just like it says here. But look, if you got a problem, you just talk to me. Like, seriously, we can work almost anything out there. It's a great precursor, but also lets them know their rights. And notice that that's only available to non-probationary employees. So that first year of employment, that's not even an accessible policy for somebody. All right, next one is vehicle usage. What does it say about vehicle usage in that book? It's like, vehicle usage stuff in the employee handbook. Only going to make you read 1 second. Just 1 second, Shelley. 1 second.
So prior to driving to an agency vehicle, an employee must have first completed a mandatory driver safety class provided by WTCSB.
That's good. Yeah, so our driver safety class, does it teach you how to be a really excellent driver? No. It's really about some procedure and some liability stuff is really what our driver safety is about. Might teach you something about where to have a client sit if you're transporting alone, or how to stagger people. Talk to you about procedures about getting a vehicle signed out, some of those kind of things. But it doesn't make you a good driver. So one of the things that I like to talk to new staff about is, hey, you may never have driven a vehicle that has a phone number and number posted on the back of it before, but I want to warn you that people have bad days. And sometimes you can be the target of their bad day because you have a phone number and a number on the back of your car, and they can call and say bad things about you. Don't give them an excuse. It's not your personal car. You probably shouldn't drive it like you stole it. You should probably be taking care of it. Remember, when you've got a client in one of these things, it's you're responsible for their life and their safety. It's just a good point to have just that kind of first conversation in case they haven't, like I said, driven an agency vehicle that's got a phone number posted on the back of it. I like to talk to staff and remind them, look, in my truck, I'm usually 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, give or take. The cops are in the other room, so they're not going to get me today. But in an agency vehicle, I'm not taking any chances that that's going to come between me and my job. I drive the speed limit. I'm getting paid to drive while I'm driving, and I'm going to do it the right way. Everybody, Shay Williams. So this is some things that I try to walk through, and that's how the handbook can be useful when you're talking to new staff. Well, also it's also a good place to talk to them about those procedures that you might have in your individual program about where you find keys, where you get a gas card, how do you use the gas card without locking it out, how do you report damage and do a pre-trip inspection. Nobody likes doing a pre-trip inspection, I don't think. However, it's a good idea to walk around a car and know if all the tires are inflated before you pull on Interstate 64 and it blows up, right? So just remind people, you weren't the last one to drive this one like you were your personal vehicle. It could have been Sheila Nickens. We know she's a little sketchy. Check your car. All right. Next section would be employee breaks. Employee breaks. You got it. You were looking while I was talking, Mercury. Yeah, cheater.
Sorry.
Just give me the first sentence.
There is no entitlement or agency provision for breaks.
That is correct. Now, hey, I've been a long time smoker. I need to get out once an hour and go out and smoke my cigarettes. I'm just going to go across the street off the property. I'm going to take my cigarette break. Am I allowed to do that? There's no entitlement to that kind of break at Western Tidewater. We do have a 30-minute lunch hour that everybody's entitled to. And some folks take an hour, and that just means that their day is a little bit longer. Yeah. That's okay. We pay you for 30 minutes of lunchtime on a shift. And so those breaks are not allowable. Now, a manager has some ability in their day for staff morale, for just taking a breather, things like that. It's fine. Go take a walk to the cooler, take a walk across the street, one time in the day. It's not like anybody's out there looking at that. That's all, of course, worked into your productivity and how people schedule their day. But people need a break away from a computer or away from sessions sometimes. So those are permissible, that you can allow those. But just know that an employee can't say, I'm entitled to a break every hour because that's what I used to get when I worked for VDOT. No, that's not the case at Western Tidewater, not our policy. There's a spot right there. And it's better to be proactive with a lot of these things for conversation so that staff don't have to have their behavior redirected once they're already in a pattern and you catch them. All right. Next one is workplace safety. Shelly again. Oh, all right. Give me a sentence, Shelly.
Right. WTCSB provides mandatory annual training on a variety of safety topics, including fire safety, driver safety, and as well as
All right. So if you took a poll of your staff in today's climate, do you think when you said workplace safety, that's what they would think about?
No.
What do they think about?
On boxes in the way. Compliance. Yeah.
Trip
That
hazard
too.
compliance.
Weapon shooters.
Active shooter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really where a lot of people's mind are going to go, and that is all about workplace safety stuff. We've done some investment over the last several months about some camera systems, buzzers. You guys know you're not just walking through the front door at Northgate anymore. You got to have your badge to be able to get in. Same thing here at Harborview, that door doesn't get opened up. So we've made some changes in some of those policies, and that's all been a result of trying to look and see what's the safest way to manage this stuff. We've given buzzers to people like Mickey, so he doesn't have to go up and open the door for somebody, but he can push the button once he's identified who it is and why they're there. They have an intercom. He can hear, oh, I'm here for an appointment with Brandon, those kinds of things. And we've got an active shooter training that I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be a mandatory watch for everybody very soon to have our active shooter training watched. I think Chief Bowie did that for us, and we recorded that training. We'll probably have that posted for folks. But it's a good place to talk to people that there's a lot of safety things that we think about. You're going to take boring Relias training on fire safety. If you're an old school staff member like me, you'll know that you used to get to put out fires with a fire extinguisher during fire safety training. It was the best part of all training that we did. Because the fire department came out, lit a pan of diesel fuel on fire, you got a fire extinguisher, you got to put that bad boy out. You felt awesome. Like you had all the control. Plus, the other thing, we talked about that experience, that practice experience. I'm way more comfortable thinking about using a fire extinguisher, to be honest with you, at this point than I was when I first started working here, just because I got an opportunity to use it before, or use it. So maybe the fire department will eventually have enough staff to be able to do that cool stuff again. But though talking through staff about why it's important to pay attention to it, things like household chemicals at residential facilities, or even in the office, if you have somebody throw up, what should you clean it with? Who would you call? We need to get something sanitized. And to talk about our security procedure. That's different at every program in some kind of way. We have some agency, planning, but in a residential house, there might be a different protocol for what you do if somebody knocks on the door than what you do at Godwin. And so you should know those procedures for that office space. Make sure they have a good program. All right. Last one. Can you tell me how much annual leave you accrue per pay period with 12 years of service at the agency? What was that? 5.5, Joyce says. 3.5?
5.5
Okay. So she got these weird decimals. I've worked with enough of our social work staff to know that math is not always a strong suit of all of our employees. No knock against the social workers. Y'all do really great work with a whole lot of people. Math is just best, sometimes less to finance. So the reason there's a decimal there, we used to get 8 hours to start off with a year, or 8 hours a month. We went from 24 to 26 pay periods. That's why there's that decimal there. It still equates to about the same amount. It's just divided across 26 instead of 24 pay periods. Helpful for staff to see that and know how they'll accrue it. It's also a great place to talk about can't use your annual leave in the first year or in the first 6 months. I'm sorry. So you'll accrue it. It'll show up, but you won't be able to be eligible to use it for the first 6 months of employment here at Western Tidewater. Your sick leave you can use it if you're sick and you need to call out. You have a doctor's appointment. That's fine. But it's a good place to talk about some of that and just make sure that they know what to expect. The other thing to know, and some folks haven't known this as we've gone through training, so I'll bring it up, is that we cascade as we get off probation. And so if you take sick leave and you run out of sick leave, it'll automatically kick over to your annual leave, so you're still getting paid. It will not do that for those employees in the first 6 months. So it won't automatically cascade into that annual leave. Even if they have it accrued, they still can't use it even in lieu of sick leave. And some of that's a protection for the agency. So we're not giving people this paid time away from work when they're not actually giving us time at work. And so that's a lot of the basis behind why that policy exists. Again, it's a nice tool. It's good to make sure that people remember where it's at. You can use it, help guide in orientation. Just thought it was appropriate to look through it and give everybody a little reminder, because some of us got hired when we didn't have one of these. And so it's been a little while since we've been on board, so we didn't have a core handbook to look at. So let's talk about benefits of orientation. There's benefits to both the employee and the manager for doing a good orientation process and having a repeatable process. It's not a good management plan in general to ever treat somebody different than somebody else. So if I had Sheila and Deborah and I was orienting both of these staff, I wouldn't want to orient Sheila in a different process than Deborah. I would want to follow the same repeatable process, and that way, if something ever goes wrong, Sheila doesn't say, well, you treated me different than Deborah. I didn't get that opportunity, blah, blah, blah. No, I can look at my sheet and I can say, we went over the same exact topics. You signed off on them, same pace, all that kind of stuff. I want to follow a process that I'm treating everybody the same. That's part of what we're after. So some of the benefits that I can think of for employees going through orientation are, it ensures they're equipped. It ensures that they've got the tools they need. If we hired a firefighter and sent the firefighter into a burning building without a suit, that firefighter would not likely return or feel properly equipped to go into that. Why would we send them into a situation where they're working with an individual with mental health issues or developmental needs and not properly equip them to do their job? That's part of why orientation is important to an employee. Increase the cohesion with the team. So when you hire somebody new in, you're bringing a new personality into an existing culture, an existing place. They're going to want to know, who are my team members? Who are my peers? What is some of the culture around what our staff meetings look like? How should I be prepared? What's the dress attire? Some of those kind of things. Good orientation helps answer some of those just surface questions that just make people feel more comfortable where they're. It's a big one. It reduces role ambiguity. So role ambiguity is when you're not really sure whose job it is to do that. So whenever the role is ambiguous, you either end up with duplicate work or missed work. And neither one of those things are good, right? If I think that the case manager is supposed to be doing the DLA 20, and I'm really the one that's supposed to be doing the DLA 20, then either we're both going to be doing it or neither one of us is going to do it, and something's going to fall through the cracks. So we talk about those kind of things in orientation. This is your job. This is what we've hired you to do. These are some of your responsibilities. And make sure that we've got a good process for kind of going over the checklist. And it increases confidence. So you know those kids I'm coaching in baseball, if I give them time where they hit off the tee and they get used to swinging a baseball bat, and I soft toss to them and they get used to swinging a baseball bat and a moving ball, and then I pitch to them in practice and I'm a terrible pitcher, they get used to hitting that ball coming at them. Then when they get into the game, they've got more confidence that they can do it because they've done it before. Our staff are no different. Give them an opportunity to practice some of the things that they would say. Give them an opportunity to shadow one of the other staff going out and doing visits or running a group or whatever their job is. Give them some confidence in that. We're all much better when we're confident in what we do. We're just better at it. Demetrius sharing clinical supervisor training. Yeah, he had some notes that he would keep in a little pocket, a little postcard, right? And he would look at that when he was doing therapy early on. And, if you've met Demetrius, as most of you probably have, he's not usually lacking in confidence, right? Or things to say. But these were good prompts for him to make sure he stayed on point with what his plan was in the therapy session. So help them with some tips and tricks to make sure they're confident whenever they go into whatever job you're throwing them into. All right. Managers. All right, who cares about those employees? We just want to know how it's going to protect us. So how are they going to help us? Well, documentation proves that we've supported people. So if you don't have an orientation checklist, make one. One that makes sure you don't forget because you've not followed, you've not covered something in a day because you had a bad day, got a phone call, and you forgot to do something, and remind you to circle back. HR is working on some standardized ones for all programs that would be signed and kind of turned into HR. It's always a good practice once you've done an orientation checklist, whether it's the standardized one or one that you've developed for your program, send it over to Amber. It can get sent into HR and be coded and just stored in the person's chart. That way, when Sheila transfers the staff over to Deborah, we already know without having to ask Sheila that she received orientation, the staff received orientation, and Deborah can go see what she was oriented on and figure out what she needs to update. Increased retention. So the firefighter without any gear to go on the fire, you think he's coming back for day 2?
No.
Probably not. If he makes it out of the fire, number 1, he might not even finish day 1. No, and our staff, if they don't feel equipped, they don't have that protection on, then they're probably not going to stick around. It establishes trust. I don't know that you guys know this. There's few things that are as important as trusting an employee and an employee trusting you that are important in the way that you interact with them. Because when they trust you, they come and ask you questions before they make a mistake. When they trust you, they don't get upset when you correct them. And when you trust them, you can send them out to do things without having to feel like you got to look over their shoulder all the time and spend all your time micromanaging. Most of you in here, I don't know that there's any true micromanagement fans in this room. So nobody wants to spend time chasing after an employee, making sure that they've written every progress note and done all that. That's a whole lot of extra work. But if you've got trust, you can give them a directive, they can go out, they can do it, accomplish it, and come back to you. And then I mentioned this earlier, establishing some common framework. Common framework and repeatability of a process is a great defense if anything does go awry down the road. We hope we never have problems with our employees, but they come up, they happen. And if Shay decides to sue me, I want to be able to say I did everything I was supposed to do for Shay to make sure she could be successful at Western Tidewater. She came in with these expectations in her job. She should have been able to do X, Y, and Z as KSAs. And I supported her with all of the policy, process, training, everything else that she needed to be successful at doing her job. And if I can demonstrate that, then okay, Shay, go ahead. If you want to pay for an attorney, up to you. Hopefully, like I said, though, none of that ever happens. Always ask your supervisors, your administrators, your directors. When you got employee things starting to pop up, always ask for help. You know, that's the other thing, that trust up your leadership chain. Ask for help. Get some guidance. Don't feel like you got to take all of it out on your own. All right. Last thing is on this PowerPoint slide, this is a fun graphic to use. The teeter-totter actually moves. If you guys ever want to play in PowerPoint with this one, you can, if you stack more on one side, it actually gets lopsided. I was disappointed that I ended up with 4 on each side. It was totally level, but it is a fun graphic. It's a little things. Anything that you would add to this that you think is a benefit to you as a manager or to the staff that I don't have listed in here? Nobody in here smarter than me? Come on.
We had an open door policy so that the staff is comfortable coming to speak to you if they have like questions, concerns before they start. Maybe talking about the grievance stuff earlier, so maybe that would be kind of helpful.
Yeah. It's close to the trust thing, but knowing that they can just bother you at any time, right? Like, come on in, ask me the question. I prefer you ask it of me than for me to have to clean up, the disaster afterwards. That open door thing is, I think, yeah, definitely a benefit. Good. All right.
Hey, Brandon, I also think they need to be taught with concerning the risk that we deal with every day. I got some employees that I believe are terrified to even work in the building with these patients.
That's a really good point, and one that comes up because pretty frequently, and it depends on what somebody's work experience has been before they've come here. All right, I'm going to try not to dive too deep into my own thoughts and feelings and keep it in the right place. But again, until you've been in that crisis situation where you see an individual that is psychotic and doesn't know what's going on, and you walked through and diffused that and felt successful at that, it's a really scary thing. Somebody throwing stuff, yelling, screaming, it feels very intimidating. Some of that's our own past, our own history. So we've all got our own baggage that I will say we bring with us, right? And mine is different than yours. My experience as a relatively large man might be different than a relatively small female. Though I've met some relatively small females that could kick my behind if we ever had to get into it, right? But definitely different. Size, things can play into it. So how do we talk about that with our new staff in orientation? And when I hired and recruited for Reach and some other programs, one of my favorite questions was, are you okay coming to work with the fact that you might get cussed at, you might get hit, you may get spit on, and you may get yelled at? And if you say that you're not ready for that, then we should have an honest conversation about what this job entails, because we are meeting people oftentimes on the worst day of their life.
And another thing that I always ask, are you comfortable going to someone's home? Are you comfortable traveling by yourself?
Not going to work at ACT if you can, right?
So
It's a fair conversation to have with people, right? And I always tell them, we do everything we can to prevent these bad things from happening. But I'm also going to be honest with you that we meet people that are not making the best choices at that time, and it's our job to help them. And being honest with people sometimes helps, some that don't. Now, when an incident happens, people sometimes still get scared, and good debriefing is really important in those things. And so we had an upset client at Northgate a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we made sure we did with some staff was we sat down, had a debriefing, and say, okay, what made you scared? What would have made you feel better? And what additional training do you need to feel more confident in this situation? And to celebrate the fact that despite it being a little scary situation, nobody was injured. We had safety protocols in place. And what did we do better? What could we do better in communication? Because there were some things where we didn't quite communicate with all the right building staff in that one. And we could have done a little bit better. And you can always learn from incidents. Always can learn from incidents. Doesn't mean you can always prevent them, but you can always learn. So I think that's an awesome point. And I think there's a big difference between our green kids that have just come out of school and never done any real work, and our staff that maybe have been in the field for a few years and had some different experiences. That doesn't mean that your green kid's always going to be afraid of everything, but it's a risk factor that you should always say, I should spend some more time talking about this with them. There's no class in college that I'm familiar with at this point that says, how do I deal with a 300-pound man that is psychotic, yelling and cursing at me and telling me he's going to hit me if I don't give him some medicine? I don't think that class exists right now. Had a really great ES supervisor here a long time ago. Her name was Nora Butler. When I got hired as a TDT clinician, I called Nora one day because I had a girl that was talking about suicide. And I'll never forget, Nora did such a great job disarming me because it was the first time I've had to experience it, and I was just a kid. And she said, well, why is the kid so pissed off? It made me like, what did you just say? She said, I think, why is she so pissed off? And I said, oh. And we talked it through a little bit. She gave me some things to talk about with the young lady. Ultimately, she didn't need to go to the hospital at that point in time. She was okay. We were able to kind of calm down. We were able to talk through safety plans with mom and some of that. But it was helpful. And Nora has seen everything, right? Nora was in the field for a long time. And I still see Nora out and about once in a while. Her grandkids, I think, are playing basketball when my kids play basketball. It's always good to see her. But those kind of conversations with staff and what to do if that happens, important. All right. Okay, we move on. Okay. We're going to talk about attendance policy. Again, not a fun document to read at night, though you can take it home, and if you have trouble sleeping, you're welcome to kind of peruse it. And the copies I passed out, if you keep them, that's fine with me. If you want to leave them and I'll get rid of them, that's fine too. You don't harm my feelings one way or the other.
We find this stuff online, right?
It is, yep. So, and on my slides where it says review the attendance policy, that's another link to right where it is on the share side. Yep.
Some good information.
Yep. All right, so we're not going to do a scavenger hunt with this one. But I want to just draw your attention to the fact. You guys need more? Are you good? Okay. Just want to draw your attention to the fact that there's a lot of good information in here that's helpful. Shay was just trying to hoard them all. Sorry, Greg. Sorry. It's always one in the class. All right. There's good guidance in here about what's it mean to report to work on. There's good guidance in here about how do you make an arrangement if you're going to be absent from work. What's an unplanned absence? What's a planned absence? What is unsatisfactory attendance? What happens if you no call, no show? I know that our staff never have these kind of problems. But in the future, if we happen to have some that develop these issues, I want you to be prepared and to know where to go and to where to direct staff. Again, another good orientation practice. This is a policy I would pull out, particularly if I work a residential program where I need coverage, things like that. I need you guys to look at this. And here's a couple of add-ons that we've got for bridges that I need you to know about.
Thank you.
But because a lot of our residential places, they do kind of have some thoughts about holiday leave and some of that where we can't always promise that we're going to be able to grant everybody's annual leave request on Christmas Day or New Year's Eve. And so sometimes we have to walk a rotation and walk through who requests first.
Right.
So you can talk about those kind of things. One thing I like to make sure that we all know and we're all comfortable with is that it is within our ability to deny a leave request, an annual leave request. If somebody asks for vacation time, you can say no. Now, is that great practice to do on a regular without any reason? No. We want to keep our staff, right? We give them annual leave so they can take a break. But we have to know that there's things like program coverage. You have to know that there's things like whoever put in leave first. We have to look at some of those kind of things and how we would balance that out. And we should always be prepared to give a little bit of an explanation. You know, Shay, I can't do 3 weeks in a row. I just don't have the staff to be able to fulfill. How can we work through this? I can probably approve 2, and we'll go from there. And we're going to get into some of that in these scenarios that we'll walk through. But having good conversations with people, I think, is always a helpful thing. The other thing I'll bring up just real quickly here is that accommodations. We shouldn't be providing even temporary accommodations within the program. Somebody's schedule, things like that. If they're saying, I've got a medical thing that's going on that I need an accommodation for. Now, somebody says, I got to go get my kids from school. I got to leave. Okay, fine. And we'll get into this in the scenario. If it's a medical thing, it needs to run through our division leadership and HR to get that information. HR runs point on those, and we'll do the communication with the employee. Because even if you have a short accommodation, sometimes they turn into long. Anyways, we'll hit that down. So I've got 4 people that we're going to look at, 4 staff: Homer Simpson, Harry Potter, Polonius Drew, and Jimmy Fallon. Do any of you have a clue as to where I went on vacation about a month ago? Yes, Universal Studios. Correct. So I got to see all these folks at Universal Studios. It was very fun. And it's a good reminder that we should all take our annual leave every once in a while. A little bit of self-care never hurts. Even if that means that you're sitting in lines with your 3 boys and they're driving you crazy. Homer Simpson. He's a longtime Western Tidewater employee, accrued a maximum amount of his annual leave. You know those people that they're always bumping off the top? He begins requesting his leave 2 days per week, Mondays and Fridays every week for 3 months. During this time, his performance begins to suffer, and he's late on his quarterly reviews, his ISPs, and his clients have complained that their needs are not being met. So, excellent supervisory minds in the room, what would you do?
They're not.
Crystal's denying. At what point would you deny, Crystal?
At the point where, so how many weeks was it?
3 months.
Oh,
She wouldn't make it that far.
oh, the first, well, take the first 2, I know what's going on. And then the second week, when he tries to do the same thing again, I'm like, no, we don't have to. So
Bring him
back about.
Yeah, I have to sit down and talk with them.
Yeah, we see.
What's going on? I think the first thing, once you recognize that this is a problem.
Yeah, conversations are
So,
great.
yeah.
Here.
I'm sorry, so in this scenario, and I know it's not in here, but I'm just playing devil's advocate. He already, since he has the maximum time, did he already say, okay, he came to the supervisor, I would like to start taking off, these 2 days? Because if he did that, then I think the conversation might be different once his performance starts to suffer.
Good point. Yeah, well, I don't really know, but that's a great question. And it does matter. No, it does matter. When does the employee start to have the conversation with you? And employees have different ways that they approach these kind of things. Some people will come right up front and just say, Sheila, girl, I'm tired of losing all my annual leave. And I'd like to start taking some of it. So my plan is over the next few months, it'd be a great time for me to have some extended weekends. And so I'd like to do this. To which point, Sheila, being a seasoned, strong manager, is going to say to them, hey, that sounds like a good idea, Brandon, but I do know it's hard to get 5 days worth of work done in 3 days. And so why don't we approve this incrementally? And why don't we then look at how things are going, and then because I don't want to put your job in jeopardy. I don't want you to be at risk of anything and put us in a bad spot. But I also don't want you to lose your leave. I want you to be able to take some leave. I want you to be able to get some breaks.
Yeah.
Or how can I find some coverage for some of this kind of? So that's a proactive one. I also know staff that do this and they think they're slick.
Yeah, exactly.
They ask for the Monday on Wednesday, and they ask for the Friday, Tuesday,
Exactly.
and they don't do it for the whole 3 month period. And then all of a sudden you look at the card, you're like, well, dang, Teresa Merch ain't been at work on a Monday or a Friday for 3 months. So those are some trends you have to watch for as a manager. You have to look at that stuff in your time cards. And look, guys, I'm clicking through time cards on Monday morning too, and just trying to make sure everybody's got their 80 hours in. But that's a responsibility we have. I know there's a lot going on. look for trends. Trends are always your friend whenever you're looking at data and things like that.
Exactly.
And be ready to have the conversations, as you said. So if I might say to Homer, I need to talk to you, I'm going to let you know I'm not going to approve your leave, or I'm going to remove my approval for these next couple of weeks. But let's talk about it and let's figure out. Okay, great. You guys got it. You're smart. Harry Potter. Harry was injured at home when he was mixing some chemicals together, and he reports that he is having trouble driving to work every day. He asks to work from home until he feels better.
Harry
He needs to go to the doctor and bring an excuse.
Yes, exactly.
Harry needs to go to the doctor and bring an excuse.
The doctor's not with prescription. It is right.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff to think about here, right?
Accountability.
If you're not able to drive to work, are you able to do your job?
Maybe
I
not.
remember.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe not. I'm not a doctor, but until I know what is impacting your driving to work, maybe not. But this is not one where I necessarily always want to get in the middle of it either. I want to say, Harry, no, I don't really think that we should do this. Why don't you, after you've talked to your doctor, get some of that information, get it directly into HR, copy me on it, and they can give us some guidance on what's appropriate to accommodate you. I'm worried about you. I want to make sure you take care of yourself, right? So these are things that happen. People do stuff outside of work, but they also feel this pressure to work because work is money. That's how I pay for things, and they want to try to come when they can, and all that. There's also people that every time they feel sick or they have a sniffle, they don't take them down. But generally, I find our employees to be really hardworking, dedicated staff in most scenarios, and I know a number of people that would be like Harry. All right, Polonius grew. He called in sick for the 7th time in the last 2 months. You know, he recently adopted 3 young girls. His unplanned absences have impacted client care at the residential home where he works. So, what are we going to do with old Polonius here?
Have a conversation.
Have a conversation with them in breakfast. By the time he's called out, and even though you know he adopted, I would still like a performance of the plan possibly, so you can
Absolutely.
see the trend of what's going on.
So he's violated our policy if he's calling out with an unplanned absence that many times. We definitely should have a conversation. Now, almost all of us got into this field because we're helpers. We're in a helping profession. We care about people, things like that. And so we see this and we're like, look, Gru is doing some good stuff. He's taking care of these 3 girls. I'm sure they're a handful. I know how you can get sick 7 times in a few months if you got 3 kids at home, because the flu will run through a house like you wouldn't believe, right? And so those things can come up. Now, because of Gru's situation, maybe is there a better place for him in the agency for right now where maybe it doesn't impact client care in the same way, where maybe he's working at that night shift at a residential home where there's only 2 people working and you can't have one person call off regularly. Maybe there's some accommodations we can make if Gru's a good employee, but we have to talk through some of that stuff. We have to involve leadership and come up with some good plans on all of that. And so, let's think about how we do that. And again, good proactive conversation, always a great tool to use. And I heard growth plan stuff, right? So I'm glad you brought up growth plan, because one of the things I want to talk about is growth plan a substitute for corrective action?
No.
It's a
It could be. It's a first step.
It could be. Is it required in every case to have a growth plan in place before you
No.
move on to
No.
corrective action? No. So my favorite easy example is, if I walked into this room and I punched for you, Wanda, would any of you think I need a growth plan? No. All of you would say, Brandon, there's 20 officers in the next room. One of them wants to escort you out of the building for the day, and you probably won't be back here. Right?
She put you there.
Right, exactly.
But offenses are offenses. And so even though we might want to do some retraining for our staff, we might want to have a plan to support them, growth plans should always accompany disciplinary action, but they are not a prerequisite to issue disciplinary or corrective action. And so if we need to get an LOC or a group 1, they don't all have to be sequential. And Layra's going to cover that more when she gets to her module, because Demetrius is trying to make sure we do a really good job of getting that a little bit more concrete than it has been. But I just want to preempt some of that with all of y'all, that we don't have to move through those as stages. You look at the offense, understand what the offense is and what level it rises to, and then you figure out what to do at that point. And sometimes you look at the mitigating circumstances on the back end and say, well, this maybe was something I should take into consideration. And so maybe it's not going to be a 2, maybe it's a 1, some of those kind of things. Great. Jimmy Fallon, he's never called out of work that you can remember, never used his annual leave. He is consistently complaining about the other staff just not being committed. And he boasts about the family events that he missed because he is so committed to the agency. You know, I didn't even go to my own kid's graduation, and you're taking off because you got a field trip to go on with one of your kids. What's that all about? You guys are just not committed to this agency. How are you gonna handle Jimmy? Yeah, so we chuckle, right? But
There are people.
I have met these folks at Lessons I Want. And not that they mean anything by it, but this is a helpful place to have a conversation about boundaries, about work-life balance, about self-care, about all these things. And so Martin says, you need to take it out. He needs to take a day off. He's a great person to refer to EAP voluntarily. You know, I think you could have it would help for you to talk through some of this kind of stuff, particularly because you're so upset with some of the other staff members and their commitment. I want you to think about your own boundaries. And it's a great place to remind him that the other staff's leave requests are your business and not his. And so if I want to let Crystal take a day off, that's my call. That's on me. You ain't got to worry about that. I like to watch football. I'm a Bills fan. Josh Allen, we just traded Stephon Diggs, best receiver on the team, right? Just traded him, and they asked him about it in an interview, and he says, I get paid to throw the football and to lead the people that are on the team, not to make those personnel decisions. It's a great answer, right?
Yes.
I get paid to make the personnel decisions. You get paid to go take care of these folks. So some of that, don't take on more responsibility than you have to. Don't be dismissive of it. But, you can have those conversations. That's not your pressure. You don't have to worry about it. Any other thoughts about our 4 friends? Doing good. We'll probably be about 10 minutes and we'll grab our break. So, some supervision expectations from the agency. None of this is new content. I stole these from HR's All Managers presentation a year or so ago and just put them into a different looking graphic. So, same words, different graphic. We should document supervision, and it should take place on a regular basis for all employees. Well, what's a regular basis, Brandon? I'm glad you asked. For new employees or employees with deficits, that would be on a weekly basis. And for staff that are kind of seasoned, been in place for a while, it's bi-weekly, every other week. Now, you can mix your group supervision into those things so that you're seeing people on a weekly basis, once individual, once group, some of those kind of things. But this is our expectation. Now, at that same time, I want to say to you all, this is really hard when you start getting up to 10, 11, 12 direct reports. This is really hard to keep up with it. You have to use things like group supervision to do that. You have to be able to trust some of your seasoned employees to be able to do that bi-weekly piece so that you're not killing yourself trying to see people. This is a lot of work, and so I don't want to ignore that. However, this is the thing that will serve you best to keep your employees and you out of trouble. Unless you're a terrible manager, which I don't think anybody here is, and you're giving bad advice in your supervision. These are the things that keep good conversation going and keep a problem from becoming a big problem because you're having regular conversation. So if you have trouble juggling some of that, let's start to have conversations. Maybe the structure in a program needs to be adapted a little bit so that there's less direct reports, so there's more help coming in to help do some of the supervision. Think about some of those kind of things. We've had these conversations. Supervision should be documented on a supervision log signed by the employee and the supervisor to substantiate the performance review. So you're always building your case for your performance review, good or bad. If I supervise Michelle and Michelle is just always doing awesome, great things, and I'm documenting that in supervision, then it substantiates why I gave her a 5 when Demetrius asks me why I gave her a 5 in these categories. Well, why she got so many 5s? Well, she's doing a good job. Look, I've been talking about it all year. And if one or both are remote, it should be sent out in email following supervision with either a read receipt or acknowledgement receipt. I'll update that just a little bit to say you can always have a signed supervision log. You can always have this email thing. I leverage Microsoft Teams for it. And I'll tell you why I leverage Microsoft. All my staff have to come to supervision with me with their own agenda. The agenda has to be established before that we meet. It is their time that I'm giving them from my day, and I want them to use it to make them better. Now, I will admit to you, I have administrators reporting to me. I have people that have worked here for a while. They're good in their professional careers, not dealing with a lot of performance issues. I'm mostly dealing with how do I manage workload, right? But they're all well prepared, good folks. It's a good professional learning experience for any level of staff, though, to say, just give me 2 bullet points of what you want to talk about when we meet. Come prepared. So my staff can put that in teams. We have our own private channels within a team called supervision. And I keep all my notes right on that same agenda. We both have access to it. We both can review it. They can never say I didn't know. They can never say I had some kind of a thought that wasn't conveyed to them. It's always there. I have it up. Usually I do most of my supervision virtual. So I've got them on one side of the screen in a picture, and I've got my supervision template on the other, and I can just keep my notes right there. It's a good thing. That's one of the reasons we had Andrew come in and talk to you guys a little bit about technology stuff, like thinking about how to leverage to be efficient.
Quick question.
Yep.
Am I understanding you that you actually have your supervision template on Teams?
Yes, I actually, I don't actually paste the template in there anymore. I have all of my folks do it. I do take all of my notes right on it. And I'm going to show you some templates that are recommended templates, but we don't have an actual required supervision template that you must absolutely use. However, in the Teams, if you want to use one of those, you can copy and paste it right into the Teams notes section, and you can
create tasks and assign them to people too.
due dates, and documentation is so important. I don't know about you guys, I forget stuff. I could meet with Joy this week and I could forget what I told her to do next week. It just happens. And so I always go back and check my previous week's notes, figure out what we had assigned, what my responsibility was and what their responsibility was to make sure we don't have anything to follow up on. So now that we know we're supposed to meet with them on that schedule, what do we talk about? What are some of the things that we expect to happen in supervision? Well, if you've got staff working with clients, they should be looking at client and staff productivity measures with them. You should be talking to them about, hey, what's your no-shows look like? Are people coming to the program? Those kinds of things. That varies based on what kind of service you do, right? That's going to change. If you are working in some kind of a treatment program, you should be talking about clinical case supervision. That sounds scary. I'm not clinical. Nope, that's not true. Anytime that we're interacting with individuals, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about interactions. That's clinical thoughts. It doesn't matter if you're an ESP in an IE residential group home, you're a front desk staff at Northgate, or you're a licensed clinician working in our outpatient department. What are the tools we have to do our job well and interact with people and maintain good rapport with our clients, maintain good rapport with other staff? We're going to talk about program compliance, policies, things like that. Any new policies we might want to review. Demetrius sends out this new guidance email. That's probably something you might want to chat about. Here's something from one of the division directors. You probably want to talk about that. Proactively talk about staff morale. Encourage teamwork within and between programs. Silos was a major thing that Amy chatted about. Everybody seemed to agree they exist. Most people don't know what other programs exist out there. The only way that we can change that culture is by all of us agreeing that we're going to figure out a way to change that culture and encourage people to talk to one another and have constructive, good, collaborative conversations. Participating in their own clinical and professional skill development. Oh, Teresa, I heard you were going back to get your doctorate. How can we support you in that process? That's a lot of extra time, things like that. We want to be able to provide you some time to do those things. Do you want to talk in supervision about how that's going? Anything that you need going on? And it can also be as simple as, hey, what are you doing to work on your documentation skills? How is there a writing course you're taking? Do you want to practice any of that here? It can be really simple or really complex items. That's all stuff that should be in supervision. So most of my staff at this point, we talk about maybe like professional skill development once a quarter-ish. It's kind of a running thing. What are you doing to get better? What do you want to learn? I always ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Doesn't matter how old somebody is. What do you want to be when you grow up? What are you striving for? And that could be the best DSP at Finney Avenue, Or it could be, I want to be a doctor of psychology and I need to continue to do a bunch of education. All right. So this little picture here, this is what I did when I became a skip manager. So this is probably 15 years ago-ish. And I needed some way to keep up. I was one of those people that had like 12 or 13 people reporting to me and trying to keep up with all these people running around at multiple schools, never in the office, and just trying to make sure that I knew what in the world was going on, right? And I just had simple things. I was always want to talk to them about training. I always want to talk to them about their documentation. This was the biggest problem in skip. People didn't do in progress notes. What their current caseload concerns were, job satisfaction, corrective planning. When we meet again. That is simple. And I kept a binder, and I did this all on paper back in the day. I just had copies of those stuck in the front and had a tab for everybody, and we blew through it, right? This isn't something you got to use. This is just my example of how I set it up that worked for me, right? And I'm going to show you the official approved supervisory log on the next page, the next slide. But other tips, like I've already said, encourage them to have their own agenda. Leverage your group supervision to do good case staffing, audits, training practice. I say training practice because, all right, if I know that Brandon has a deficit in understanding reactive attachment disorder, and he's got a kid on his caseload that has reactive attachment disorder, well, the best way for him to learn is to teach sometimes. So when you prepare to teach and talk to your other staff about that, you have to learn enough to be able to be comfortable saying that. And so I'm going to work with him to develop a training for the rest of our staff so that he learns and my whole crew learns while we're doing group supervision. Good practice thing, using clinical supervision type of stuff all the time. Just think about those as extra benefits. All right. And this is the official approved one. It's on the SharePoint. Mixed feedback on this one. Some people are like, okay. Some people are like, no, don't really like it. Again, you have to use what works for you. All right. You have to be efficient with it. Just make sure you're covering the content that you should be covering. There's a lot of these things up here because these are things that we want people to know. And so look at that stuff. So even if you're making your own template, just make sure you understand why some of those were on there. If you don't know, ask. Some of it matters, some of it doesn't. Well, depending on the job. All matters, just doesn't always matter for every job. But that's the end of that section. That's usually where it's a good place to take a break. Do we have any questions or thoughts before we give ourselves 5 minutes? Okay. It is 10:09. If you guys could be so kind as to be back here by 10:14, that would be awesome so we can keep moving and we don't keep hearing later. What do I have to say?
I can bring you those.
I have some up there too. 1 o'clock. Say, I'm gonna break out.
My parents do not have any other way to punch my dad. He's like a military.
And it was so hard for me to use because I had one.
Thank you for that. Just me yesterday. They were trying to figure out something with that guy.
Let me tell you.
So I just all that.
No, it's not necessary. You don't have work. And it went somewhere. Yeah.
And not our fault. That was what that was when people called me. That's why you guys all running. It's about this first state there and not necessarily our process and figure out how we work things.
I have no idea. I have no problem. I mean, I
It's,
so like you gotta make.
I mean, like I would have been okay with it.
So.
No way.
well, it wasn't that. I feel like that was just, don't want to, maybe we're the change a little bit.
We got to end that kind of diversion.
Right.
What I can't do that. Continually saying, You've heard me say it.
Like that, but you know, that's.
You're biting your tongue, I got you.
So we're in.
Yes, ma'am.
Is agency gonna come up with an expectation about
Well, that's that once a week with some staff in place and every other week. It depends on, like I said, I think the number of direct reports really impacts that. Now, it doesn't have to be individual supervision. You can use your group supervision.
I'd rather be doing at least individual.
You have to have at least one individual to usually what I think.
No.
Because I mean, that's how people are gonna share some of their stuff. But I know it's hard, and the other thing you can do is leverage shorter times in some cases. So like instead of leveraging an hour, you can leverage a 30-minute block. But I'll share one of the things that does seem to happen when you get into the routine is that the interrupting have to come to you with a question 15 times a day. Sometimes slows down when you get into a good supervision routine because people can get to just bringing the issue to supervision rather than feeling like they got to come knock on your door and talk to you every second of every day. So,
And I guess, we were just talking about it everywhere. We do this stuff anyway, but just finding the time.
I know.
Write it.
Right.
And you guys, so you're in a different situation. Actually, both of you are. You both have you have one every day of supervision, and you have one every week.
Yeah.
So you're seeing your employees pretty regularly. Where I see this falling short is often in residential. Residential hardly ever meets with their staff. So we have some work to do on that. But I think it's important to also think about how you can leverage team leads in some cases to help you.
That's just.
What would you think? Advocate for one.
Because I do a lot of that with Patrice, and I was telling her that has just been so helpful to me because there's no way I could
See, and I
do all
think
of this.
they were already part of the problem with the supervisors call the team lead. That's what T-Mac named as, I think, that is, that's what I'm just reading. Maybe that's what it's kind of true. But you're right. Definitely. I mean, how much time do you have? 12, 13. Yeah.
You probably need to figure out a way to make some help and not just elevate somebody that can help.
I have elevated someone, but sometimes, when you're looking at the most senior person, it's not always the ideal person to be in that position, but because it happened. That was landed.
Yeah, I understand. But so just to that point though, is that if you can find ways to say, hey, I want you to meet with.
And I do have another person, but I think it's related with that. You always have that person that really is helpful too. But I wanted to figure out a way, not that it's to put her with helping me with that, with just that.
It's so funny to hear, like, just because I know Sean.
She's on when it comes to like people, but when it comes to the other stuff, yes, I can. I mean, I can call her literally. Like on a Saturday, and say, "Look, I got this issue going on." She can do that side of it. She can call clients. So I know. So she's just somebody that I would love to see. The time she's been here, good job.
Maybe she needs the opportunity to see herself in where she has to work in that way. Because she's not incapable.
No, she's not. She's very good at it. She really is. Yeah, and I need to really talk to Donna, because I made sure that the person I need, because I'm gonna have a team lead to help me with this. Because then that will train you to do more of the whole. Right. And some of the training.
I saw Sean and like, her grandson was same age as my middle son. They both play baseball. And I was on her face and I heard Sean before I saw her. And so I came over between these and I said, Sean, I knew you were here. I didn't know where you were at, but I heard you. She goes, I didn't know you were out there either. And I heard Stacy say Paxton and she's like, I only know from Paxton.
Yeah, that's her. That's her. I tell you, it's been good. Yeah.
All right, we're a little bit late. Sheila's fault. Y'all blame her to get out of training today.
Yes.
All right, we're moving into productivity. And I'm going to step on the gas and keep us going. I'm not going to bore you guys to death with this because I've talked about some of this material in an all managers meeting. But I'd like to review a couple things. The first one is client productivity. We don't always think about managing client productivity when we start talking about productivity. We're most used to talking about our staff or our programs being productive, but none of that actually works if the clients aren't productive themselves. And so what do we think about client productivity? Well, do they show up for treatment? You can't be productive as a client and moving towards treatment goals if you don't show up. So that's one thing. What's our no-show rate look like? Are they participating in services? They come to day program every day. How do they look like as productivity from their standpoint? Are they making progress towards their treatment goals? If they had the same ISP for the last 15 years and Mary Hyler's saying to you, why haven't you changed the ISP over the last 15 years? And why are they still working on this very same thing? Well, because the client's not being productive. So what does that mean? We need to talk about, is this really the right service for them? Are we doing the right strategies for them? Are we even paying attention when we're rewriting the treatment plans? Some of those things. Engagement. What does the person's engagement look like when they show up for care? Do they come in and you sit through an outpatient therapy section and the entire time they say 4 words? That may be okay depending on what stage of treatment you're in. Maybe some of just the progress is just showing up for the session. However, that also may be a sign that they're not engaged. No-shows are a great indication of lack of engagement. But also, how does the employee or the client respond to you when you give them strategies and things like that? Do they always distract? Do they always deflect blame? And decreased symptoms. Hopefully, if we do our jobs well, people have a decrease in symptoms. I know that it's not a linear chart for everybody, right? But in general, if we believe in the treatment that we offer, we should see some decrease in symptoms. And in fact, maybe Sheila's looking at me kind of funny. I know what she's thinking. She's saying, I'm doing good if we don't have any increase in symptoms. And I'm keeping the person baseline because they've struggled for years and been in that hospital.
Nice.
Both of those things are equal arguments, are good arguments. And I would argue that a decrease in symptoms for some of our ACT clients are that they're not going to the hospital because they're not acting out in so many ways. They're getting stable with those supports in the community. There's a lot of other ways to think about client productivity. We can talk about DLA 20. We can talk about all that. DLA 20 has terrible inter-rater reliability, meaning if Shay does one and Joy does one, they're not likely to end up with the same score at the same time.
Yeah.
But if Shay's always the one that's doing it, in general, you get some utility out of the DLA 20 if you have the same person doing it over and over again. And that can be an indicator that, hey, things are either getting better or worse, or we're looking at domains. So the total DLA 20 score might be different, but we're seeing domain improvement on the areas that we're focusing on in the service. So that's client productivity. Now, not unrelated, employee productivity. Well, employees also have to show up. So you can't be productive if you don't work. Just a fact. Timely task completion, other things that we look at. Are you doing your progress notes day of service? Are you taking care of this assignment that I gave to you by the deadline I gave you to do it? All those kinds of things. Billing, of course, yes. We sometimes get flack because we worry about billing. But I will tell you what, we also get flack if we don't send people a paycheck. And the way the paycheck gets done is the billing that gets collected. So just keeping all that stuff in mind. Fidelity. Are we maintaining fidelity to our model? Are we doing ACT? Are we doing FFT? Are we doing FPP work, are we staying in alignment with the model of care we're supposed to be delivering? And what does our client improvement look like across the caseload? How come every person that Teresa Merge works with seems to get worse? But everybody Martin works with gets better. What's going on here? Client engagement. How come nobody ever shows up to see Yolanda? Why she keep running them off? Like, what's the deal? Why does she need help with that engagement phase of treatment? Those are all things that we look at as productivity, and it's places that we can help as supervisors to help them improve their own performance, right? Programmatic productivity, also our responsibility. How are our programs doing? Overall, do we have clients showing up? Maybe the PSR day program is too boring for anybody to want to participate in. Maybe we should think about that. Not an assessment of the PSR program, just not trying to knock any work. Budget performance. Are we bringing in enough revenue from the various sources to make sure that we can pay the bills? Can we pay our staff based on the money that's coming in? Is Andrew breathing down our necks every 2 seconds, telling us that we don't have enough money coming in? What do we need to adjust? Who here knows what the biggest expense in any of our budgets is? Yeah, it's people. We're a human service agency. You have to pay humans to provide those services. Human service.
At least for now.
Correct. Until AI takes over, right?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, Jesus.
It's incredible about, wasn't it 5 years ago or something that Credible gave a demonstration of AI doing PTSD therapy?
Yeah, we're doing a pilot right now with AI. Incredible.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a couple of clinicians that's actually helping them write their progress notes. So here's a telehealth session, summarizes it through an AI bot, and then takes and puts it in a bird note format. They can copy and paste. Now, they are still reviewing and putting it into the documentation. So we're in the beta phase.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Go for it, like Incredible show where they had AI doing therapy for the PTSD for that. Then they were talking about the success of it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, how does AI interpret? Like, how do they have empathy? How do they have insight? How do they, I can understand reading micro expressions stuff. So I like the note thing though.
There'll be it.
Yeah, it's first steps in things that I think are going to be important. And I don't want to get too off track here, but I think those are things that are changing our field and that we need to be aware of for a couple of reasons. One, ethics. So Teresa brings up basically some ethical concerns. How does that bot really know how to read people? And do they read Teresa the same way they read Yolanda? Or are there some cultural differences? And those are some big conversations in AI. The other thing is what about clinical recommendations that you still use a clinician to then do? So this happens, if you guys go to an emergency department, I'm going to tell you right now, there is some AI that is feeding a doctor recommendations based off of your symptoms.
Okay.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're saying, and it's like a Google search, but it's AI saying, hey, Brandon's got a runny nose, a fever, and all these things. You should probably check for the flu, or you should try these medications. And that's stuff that the doctors are then leveraging. So we can only remember so much stuff, particularly an ER doc, right? Think about all the things that come in there. You got a mental health patient in Bay 1, you've got a COVID patient in Bay 2, you have a broken arm in Bay 3, and then you've got a abdominal pain in Bay 4. That's a lot of stuff to deal with. So some of those things can help make sure that you don't forget things that you need to know in that particular patient area. But we don't, maybe all of us seem to be a little bit hesitant about it. We really want AI to just make that decision for them, or do we want that to be clinical guidance that they can then use their practice to use? Yeah, anyways. We could talk for a long time on this one. If you guys want to talk about it.
We'll have a separate meeting for that. Yeah.
Things like vacancy rate. Do you think about that as a productivity measure for your program? Now, it might be the most frustrating part of your program because you can't get staff, but it's also a measure of how productive your program is. If you can't retain, or recruit staff, we need to be trying something different. We need to think about those things. Policy, compliance, and staff performance. We all know staff performance. We know policy and compliance. Just the ways to think about different productivity levels and are responsibilities associated with them. Now, I'm a data guy and I like to look at pictures because pictures help me separate rows of data out from other stuff. And so these are just a couple of slides I used in the past. I'm not going to dwell on them. But if I put something in a picture like this, and this is just my no shows for one of my clinicians, and I want to talk about no shows in their program, I'm going to look at 96465 because he's got the most, right? Sometimes a picture can help you dissect what's going on and make. So I encourage folks, grab some stuff incredible, pull it out, put it in a picture if you can in a graph. Sometimes Credible AI's got some of these things already in a graph. There's a reason for that. Leverage and use that stuff. Ask questions of the Credible team. Tell them you'd like to have this report. They'll gently figure it out.
Also have to remember that sometimes the person with the most no-shows is trying to serve the most difficult SLM clients.
Correct. So this is a supervision topic, not necessarily an automatic action, right? Why is that? Good. I talked to you already about DLA 20 and some of the iterated reliability things. But this is just, again, a conversation point. What's up with clinician 9? I'm trying to figure out my low-hanging fruit. How do I prioritize my time in talking about stuff? Clinician 9's got a negative 0.9 DLA 20 score change across their caseload. Okay, why? It doesn't necessarily mean that that person's a bad clinician. It could mean that they had the most challenging caseload. They could be an ACT provider, and they might have gotten all of the brand new hospital discharges assigned, that they're kind of working. I don't know. Lots of different things. It also doesn't mean that clinician 2 is really good. It means that clinician 2 maybe has figured out how to score DLA 20s and make them a little bit higher. So it looks like they're doing all good conversation, all good made possible by looking at a picture, sometimes versus looking at rows of information. And you guys are used to seeing these kind of things. How much time did we bill, or how much did we bill, and how many hours a day did we spend with clients? And those are some routine, like rudimentary metrics, but they're important ones. And it does cause me to ask the question, why has employee 4 got 0 billing, but almost the top level of time with clients? What's employee 4 doing with those guys?
They're wrong code or not nothing at all.
Right. Could be using just the wrong form incredible. Could be just that simple. Or maybe their job does non-billable work.
Or selecting the wrong service. We've done that.
Yeah, these things happen, right? But they're, again, when you look at it like this, it gives you an opportunity to say, this is something we can talk about in supervision and we can just have a general discussion about and figure it out. It doesn't mean that I'm going to look at these two graphs and say, employee 4 is getting written up and employee 9 is getting written up. But employee 9 situation is definitely a little different. No billing and very little client time. I probably have concerns about what they're doing documentation-wise. And it leads me to then have a good discussion with them and possibly put them on a growth plan, possibly cite them for. And also, I might encourage employee 8 and say, man, you're knocked out the park. What's your secret, employee 8? Help talk to us about this. How are you making sure this is happening? All right. Any other thoughts about productivity? I don't want to bore folks with that. I just want us to remember that's part of our job when we think about productivity in a lot of different ways. All right. I told you I was going to be quick through this one. All right. So this is my first graphic that I thought was fun.
Oh, that's so cute.
Everybody kind of stuck in their own little ring. These look like playpens to me. Like I have a bunch of toddlers and they're all in playpens and they can't get out and go talk to anybody else and play with anybody else. And sometimes that's what a silo feels like to me, is that we're stuck in our own little world and we're unaware of what's going on with all the other people that are playing around us. And they form because our priorities, goals, tools operate in individual business units rather than across the board. And so you guys met Beth Alford if you attended a couple of her sessions not too long ago. She's working on a large communication plan for the agency for us to implement that will help with some of this stuff so that we have some shared goals, some shared vision. We were a 250 employee agency not too long ago, 2010, and we are now almost 800. That's a big organizational jump, both in terms of growth over time, as well as when you hit that 800 mark, it requires different communication strategies to reach people in the same way. 250, you can pretty much know everybody. I will attest to this. When we were 250, I had almost sat through every interview we did, and I knew every new hire. I knew almost everybody that worked here at that point in time. At 800, I'm glad I know some names of people that are in this room. Because We just don't have that same experience. So you have to have different strategy. That's some of what Beth is helping us work through. She says, you guys are no different than other agencies I see. And that's like, oh shoot, we're crazy, but we're crazy like everybody else. It's all good. So you'll see some of that come out, and those are some important tools for us communicating internally and externally. If we don't have good internal communication, how can we ever expect our staff to talk to other people in the community about what we do and do it well? And I take ownership in this. So my role is to make sure we've got good strategic planning, good strategic vision, good strategic work that we all do. And if I'm not doing a good job with that, then all of you suffer because I haven't done my job effectively. So this is one of my major goals of figuring out how to work through this. All right. This is my little fun picture. So a little bit about me. If I didn't work here, I would operate heavy equipment. And I would do stuff like tear down silos for a living, because at the end of the day, you see what you did, and it's cool. I'd be moving heavy dirt, all that kind of stuff. It'd be great. But how do you tear down those silos? So how do we do that work internally? Single source of truth is something I want you guys to think about. Not long ago, we said, Credible is our single source of truth for financial, client, etc. You might agree with that or you might not. If Credible doesn't give you the right information, you should fix it. It's the source of truth. We have no other way to say there's another source of truth out there. Clear workflows. How are we describing what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, how you're supposed to do it? How do we have those set up for all the things we do? And how do we create that artifact for others so that I can say to Shay, this is my process for admissions to a CRC. How does that mesh with your admission to Bridges when we start to accept kids as a CRC? What would you like me to include in that workflow so that I can make your job easy? Encourage cross-program collaboration through shared experiences. And then also some shared responsibility and accountability. So if we have a complex case staffing, I think all have shared responsibility over one client or over the progress for the client. Go ahead, Deborah.
But you share responsibility in terms of my case managers do one thing, but then the peers also do something else with that peer. So we all share how we touch that particular client and what we do work with them.
Yeah, So we're decreasing our role ambiguity. We may be working across different teams. So, Deborah's team is lucky. They got a whole bunch of interdisciplinary stuff. So Sheila's the same way. They can do it. They're like a self-contained unit in some ways. But in other places, we don't have that. And so we have to rely on working with other programs and have to think about that. So how do we create that shared accountability for all of us to do that work together and be responsible to one another? That's how we create relationships. Relationships drive some of that culture. And we have to model the behavior as managers. You've got a problem with what's going on in case management? Oh, hold on. Let me pick up the phone and call somebody. Let's have a conversation now. Let's talk through it. Let's schedule a meeting. Let's not sit and complain for the next hour about how bad Sheila's program is. Let's just talk to them and say, let's develop some shared understanding of how we can work together. Yep. It's hard, guys. I get busy too. And sometimes I'm like, there's an email going out. I'd love to call them. I don't have time now. I'm going to send an email. But I do try to follow up later with people and have those actual real conversations. All right. Any other thoughts on silos? I know I'm going fast, but some of this I don't want to dwell on things too long. You've already had. All right, so SWOT I think is an underutilized tool because it allows you to take a more global perspective rather than being stuck in your day-to-day, seeing the things that are going on right in front of your face, and allows you to get a broader subset of input, possibly from your whole team or others that interact with your team. And so a SWOT is just assessing your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can see this quadrant kind of breaks everything out. Your strengths and weaknesses are internal factors, and your external factors are opportunities and threats. Now, a SWOT in and of itself, if you do it, is no good if you don't do anything with it. You just assess it, write it down, but you create no plan out of it. Well, all you've done is an assessment with no treatment plan. So this is your assessment phase for a program, and then you move into a planning phase. But when you conduct this, it should be done with members of your team or some other stakeholders to be able to talk about that and give you a broader perspective. So if I want to talk about how great youth SAIOP is and understand where we've got some opportunities for it, we're going to bring in Yolanda. We'll maybe get a couple course service unit folks and maybe a couple of DSS folks, and we'll sit and talk about that. And we'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the program. The curriculum we chose, really great program. Yolanda did a great job picking all that up. I know I'm picking on you. Don't get me. I ain't gonna pick on you. What are the weaknesses? Well, we've had a hard time recruiting some CSECs. So, one of the weaknesses we have is in recruiting and being able to advertise and bring people in. What are the opportunities? Oh, there's a lot of kids out there struggling with substance abuse issues. And we really want to be able to get them into care. We want to head this off before they're adults. We want to keep it from impacting school. We want to keep them out of juvenile detention. We want to be able to provide that treatment. Those are all options. Lots of kids out there. Threats? Man, they got some dirtbag parents. They won't drive them. They'll take them to baseball practice, but they ain't bringing them to treatment. There's a threat, an external factor. Okay? But once you kind of do that whole assessment, you can say, okay, well, how do we leverage the fact that we got a good program and a good curriculum? Maybe we start to use Yolanda to do some community segments as a way to advertise the program. She's talking to people in schools. She's talking to people in courts. How do we look at our weaknesses so we can improve on them? So our weaknesses having a hard time recruiting CSECs? Why don't we create a development program in our agency to develop CSECs? Demary knows how to supervise CSECs. We can leverage her. The opportunities. Lots of kids out there. How do we capitalize on the lots of kids out there? How do we market to those kids so they want to come? What kind of theme park does Yolanda want to run here at Harborview at night? Is she putting in some slides and a putt-putt golf course, or what's going on? What's going to bring the people to the site? And those threats. What can we offer those parents? They're dealing with a lot of stressors. They're not really dirtbags. They've all got hard things. They're working a job, maybe 2 jobs, trying to do it. The kid's terrible to them at home. And how do we support the parent? What can we offer to the parent when they come? Should we feed them a meal? Should we offer the transportation for free? Figure out how to do that. So you use this assessment, whole point, use this assessment to develop a plan based off of what you assess. And Yolanda may get a whole lot of feedback from other players that will help inform some of the decisions and the planning that she has. Marcus Alert's another great place where you've already got a group of stakeholders and Shelley's been putting together a plan. She could do this in a year and use this as a way to assess how the program operated in the first year and then make her adjustments to her plan for the following year. So underutilized tool, I think, can be done internal in your program, can be done with some external help. Just don't sit on it. Do something with it. Even if you only take one thing and develop a plan around it, do it. Any questions about that?
You said we're gonna get this in a.
Yeah, you're gonna get all this as soon as I finish up. Yep. All right. And if you want to earn points for boys that like crude jokes, you can call it snot instead of SWAT. You just replace the weakness with needs, and then you can call it a snot with everybody else.
Bruthology.
It works. I'm a boy dad of 3 boys, and whatever it takes to get their attention. All right, this is the most fun part of what I want to talk about today, and that's leadership style, philosophy, some of those kind of things. I think, and I forgot to ask you guys at the start because we got the kind of delayed start. I want you to picture in your career, you've probably had an example of a really good leader that was a big influence on the way that you manage and the way that you've operated in the workplace. Could have been early in your career, could have been some point now, could be somewhere in the middle. There's probably somebody that you've got as an example that you learn some stuff. And you've also probably got an example of somebody that you have no desire to act like as a leader. That you're like, hell no. And the truth is, we learned from both of those types of leaders. We learned what we don't want to be and why we didn't like it, and we learned what we wanted to be and why we liked it. And it's important to try to do some of that assessment of current leadership, past leadership, and all that kind of stuff, and your own style to say, okay, well, what are the things that are good? And how do I interact with people? I might get another one of those people in my life that I didn't really like. How did I successfully navigate that and not have to leave or didn't, those kind of things? What could I have done better? what are some of the things I know just because that's the person's personality type that I'm going to have to work around? Constant assessment of what's going on around you and how you shape your own stuff. So I sold a list that I've got up on the board of leadership styles from Forbes. You got a link to the article that you can grab yourself if you want to. But I think it's important for us to talk about what are some of the leadership styles out there, because we don't always reflect on where do we fall. Most of us are very situational down there at the bottom. We'll change how we act based on the circumstances around us. We have a default, like we have this is kind of our go-to, but sometimes we've got to be this way or we've got to be that way. And that's good. That's management experience, knowing how to do and switch across it. But we generally have some places where we trend. My next slide, when you get these, will have links to 2 different leadership style assessments. They're only going to assess you for the top 4. They only take 5 minutes, maybe 10 if you're a slow clicker, to go through. I did both of them. I got the same style on both. So there is at least inter-quiz reliability. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but they gave me the same result. Just a fun thing to do when you got a couple minutes to click through those things and see if it lines up with what you think about yourself. So these top 4 are kind of like some primary ones, and then these 5 through 9 are a little bit more on the side, or they're not part of the major models, but all of them inform a lot of things about what we do. So I'm going to go through them and just give an overview. Autocratic. This is, I'm the boss. You will do what I said. I don't care what you say. We're going to do it the way I want to do it. We're going to come up with a plan that I want to do, and we're going to do it now, and we're going to do it in the way I said it, right? This is dictatorship. That's what autocratic leadership style is. You guys laugh because many of you are thinking, I hate when people act that way, right? But if you have a bad or a problem employee that is screwing stuff up, sometimes you have to act in this style. In emergency events, sometimes you have to act in this style. If you're the person that's responsible for making sure an emergency plan gets carried out, you better do what I said, when I said it, how I said it. This is why in the military, there's a leadership hierarchy. If you're going into a place where people shoot at you, you better listen and know who's in charge to tell you how not to get shot, right? Hopefully you've got a good leader making those decisions. So again, not usually people's favorite style or the way to classify themselves. Oh, I'm an autocratic leader. Walking around with my chest. No, but very necessary in certain situations. Democratic, opposite of autocratic. Democratic means I'm going to get input from everybody about how to make these decisions. I'm going to ask everybody's thoughts. How are we going to do this? Put the onus on the team. Most of us are supporters of democracy. We live in the United States. Seems like a good plan. Let's go back to that situation where people are shooting at us. Probably not the best style to use. Guys, what do you think about what we should do? Greg, there's somebody shooting at me right now. Should I leave or should I just stand here? It doesn't work in those situations, right? But it does work in fostering a collaborative environment where the team finds ownership, wants to find their own responsibility, some of those kind of things. It can be used in that scenario. Laissez-faire. This is the hands-off leadership style. Hey, you do you. I think we go figure it out, and we'll see what happens in the end. It's kind of the hands-off. Let's see what happens. This can be good if you're trying to promote independent thought and you're trying to promote some creativity and trying to get them to do some things for on their own. It's not great if you've got deliverables and things that you're going to get yelled at because Deborah did it wrong. All right. Bureaucratic. So this is following a set of rules, policies, operating procedures, things like that are very cut and dry. This is very QA-ish. This is my QA leadership style, right? The policy says this. You didn't do that. You were wrong. The procedure said this. You did this. You were wrong. Or the policy said this. You did it. You were right. Great job. But there's not necessarily the opening for interpretation so much when you're 100% bureaucratic. And it doesn't rely on the leader's personality. It doesn't rely on charisma. It doesn't rely on their dictatorship or their not dictatorship. It's just this is what it is, and it is what it is. Now, we leverage this. When you audit a chart, you either did it or you didn't do it. Very, very bureaucratic. All right. Servant leadership. A servant leader puts the needs of the employee ahead of their own needs, ahead of the program needs, ahead of anything else. They're wanting to develop and grow and push that employee up. A lot of us think it sounds really nice. I wish somebody would focus on me like that. Again, it's a great way to support employees. It doesn't work in some situations where you can't focus on that employee's stuff because you got other jobs to do. You can blend a lot of this stuff into pretty much anything. Coaching, just like what it says. You're coaching, you're providing opportunities for practice, training, feedback on their stuff. You're coaching the person along. Coaching is a concept used in schools a lot. They actually have like academic coaches that work with teachers that say, hey, this is how I would do it. Why don't you go out and practice it? Here's a technique. Then they'll give feedback on that from classroom observation. We do this a lot. We observe people providing treatment. We observe people interacting with others. Provide feedback and give more opportunity to practice. A charismatic leader. This is the person with the big personality, the ability to get people to follow and move in the way that they want them to move because they're likable, they're affable, they're people that people want to follow. Sometimes very good, sometimes very bad. It depends on who the charismatic person is. All right, Hitler was a charismatic leader. Most of us would say that didn't work out very good. However, Kennedy was a charismatic leader. Most people have a fairly high perception of him. So just thinking about who that big charisma is part of what it is. We got a lot of these out there today. We got the Elon Musks of the world. We've got the Bezos of the world. All that very charismatic, big personalities, people following them. Who's the Apple guy? Bill Gates. Yeah. They at least, he'd come out and had the presentation and stuff, and he had his own style and swag-ish. And that was part of why people followed and liked Apple products was the personality that was created. All right, and last one other than situational is transformational. Now, I will say in this agency, we have had a broad range transformational leadership approach in a lot of stuff over the last 10 years. We talked about that exponential growth. We had to be transformational in the way that we approached to keep up with the changing environment in the service system in Virginia to keep pace with people. We wanted to grow, we had to change. And it's uncomfortable. It makes us feel like sometimes we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off. It makes us feel like there's more work to do than's possible. It makes us feel like there's not enough staff to fill all the vacancies. But it's also changed us from a $20 million a year agency to a $65 or $70 million a year agency, a 250 to an 800 staff agency. And what's most important about that is not how big our budget is or how many people we employ. It's how many people we help. If we didn't have a bridges program located in our locality, I guarantee we wouldn't be sending as many kids to get help there as we do right now. Because it's easy for our parents to get to. If it was in Virginia Beach or on the Eastern Shore, almost none of our kids would go. If we didn't have a crisis receiving center, everybody'd still be just walking through the door in Ovacy. There's still too many of them going. Not Ovacy's fault, just different opportunities for people, right? If we didn't have ACT teams and PACT team and all these kind of things that have been part of that growth, our citizens, who just a reminder, settling of our own thoughts. Our community services board is designed to be the public support for citizens with mental health, substance use, and developmental needs in their community. And we have had to get big, fast, and do things beyond what we were always comfortable with. And that's been a transformational part of the way that we've led in the agency. We're trying to get out of this a little bit, slow down. Honestly, like if you look even over the last couple of years, we've tried to slow down a little bit. There's still some crisis stuff that's a little bit busy, but we're trying to get better. We're trying to reestablish how do we look at QA? How do we look at policy and procedure development? How do we look at some of these things that are going to be really important objectives for us as an agency and recenter our lives around our mission? So you can take the test and see kind of where you fall when you go through it. See if it surprises you. Think about those leaders that have impacted your life. I think that's really important to know where you're going and where you've come from. Know if somebody hurt you. and know if you've hurt somebody else that you've been a leader of. How do you correct for that? When was your leadership style not the wrong approach with somebody? It happens. But that, I think that self-reflection, understanding where you tend to land can also inform you about how you might have to adapt that. I also have to understand, like, I report to Demetrius, right? I have to understand what kind of a leader Demetrius is. And how do I then deliver my work to meet his expectations? He is my boss. I don't always have to agree with my boss, but I do have to do what he asks me to do. And I have to know how to challenge him when it's appropriate for me to do so. All of us should know how to challenge our leaders and do so in a way that's respectful and can be received by them. And they should know how to challenge us. And I'll share this last one with you. When I first started kind of doing some business development stuff, but Demetrius walked into me when I was working on our first big grant application at VP and said, nobody's going to give us a little board in Suffolk $800,000 a year to do this thing. You're wasting your time. And I said, bet. And that was one of the best ways for him to challenge me, was to say, you ain't going to get it. And then I'm like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I don't do well with that. Like that, and that motivates me. Now, some people that would crush, and they would just say, well, I'm going to give up. You ain't gonna. Right. But no, for me, that was the best motivation you could have given me. I poured myself into that one. Loved FEP. Still think it's one of the coolest paradigms out there. But that inspired me to do some work. So that was his leadership doing something that changed something that we did here. And we all have the ability to read our staff and know how to motivate them. And we can, look, if you don't think you're a very good coach, study. Learn how to coach. Think about some coaching principles. That doesn't mean you got to go coach a baseball team. It just means that you can learn about, how do I provide practice opportunities? How do I provide training for my staff? All that. All right. Anybody, want to share anything where they think they're going to fall? Anybody want to be so bold? Joy? Come on, Joy.
What do you think, Brandon?
For you?
Yeah.
I would bet that you are probably between a 2 and a 5.
Well, it's 7 and a 1.
7 and a 1. Okay.
Because I am I'm able to say those things, and my staff will follow me because they trust me. But I do a lot of coaching for my managers.
Okay.
I'm going to find their management staff.
I can see that.
And it is also situational because you just don't understand.
And you've got a lot of situations where you got to be like, no, this is how we're going to do it.
I mean, I do listen to them and get that because it just may be a topic that, my managers have a better idea on it. We'll try it out. I sure will. And if it don't work, we'll right back to the table.
Well, but that's still a democratic process. You're listening.
That's my section too.
Yeah. Good.
They don't have crazy.
Did you say crazy? Anybody else? Everybody in here view themselves as a leader? Is that a hat you put on and recognize that you are? You're even a leader there, girl.
I think that depends on the employee.
Okay.
I have different types of employee. One requires more of that sort of where I have to give step by step and I have to be there step by step. And the other one needs reassurance. And then it just fluctuates. So I feel like my leadership depends on the person that I'm leading.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good assessment's important. And how you can flex between those styles, right?
Right.
And can you do that comfortably? And you have confidence when you've got to use this autocratic style. This was the hardest one for me to get to.
That's a good way. It is hard. It's a combination of the home. I don't know if that will make things situational.
Yeah.
But I see where management would need all of these things depending on what they're doing and who they're doing it with.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to study this stuff. Mm-hmm. So my very first class for my MBA was a leadership class. I had to assess my current leader. I had to assess my own leadership style, and I had to talk about the pros and cons of both. And understand why, and understand all these other, there's some other work to understand all these other leadership styles. But a good leader has a bigger toolbox than, you don't just carry around a screwdriver. You better have a hammer, you better have a staple gun, a couple other things in there, and something.
Get there.
And so, yeah, I think being students of leadership is also one of the requirements that we should all put on ourselves.
I think the autocratic is personally my least favorite. But if I need to micromanage, you're going to be micromanaged. You are not going to like it. And I'm going to encourage you all along the way that for the staff, if they'll pick up and do what they need to do, I'm more than happy not to micromanage. But boy, can I and will I. But yeah, I think you float. I mean, I don't know how I have people that I know I can count on.
Yes.
And, so I'm more coaching, encouraging.
And I would guess you're more comfortable in that style.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's I think the point is, where your comfort zone is, and know when you've got to turn something up.
Yeah.
I just feel like though some of those scenarios lead yourself up to being kind of partial.
Mm-hmm.
You
can
lead yourself to. I mean, one employee said, why you allow them to do this, but
Well, that happens.
that's something that I always worry about. So, I'm kind of straight down the middle with it. I want to listen to what you got to say, but we're going to go to the policy. But my policies are procedures out first. We're going to follow those. We're going to step off from that, and then we're going to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we all have to have some of this. We all have to have some forward. Forward is what protects you from bias. So while I may approach Sheila a little differently than Deborah, I had the same expectation of Sheila and Deborah.
Right.
Or I'm grading their performance on the same scale. So Sheila and Deborah, I might expect the same thing. I might get more from one or the other. And so I'm going to grade them on that same expectation.
You have to do that because of the difference in personality. So you have to approach a person the way you can motivate them and empower them to get something done. Yeah.
It's a little prejudice.
Right.
Yeah. Which one that LLP and I need to quote.
Exactly.
Standard of conduct. It looks the same for you.
Right. Yeah.
It has to be, yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yep. And I think it's good to talk to your staff about that. I think, particularly if you've got young folks or folks that want to have some leadership at some point, I think it's good to talk about some of this stuff with them and to understand why you're doing something. I guess staff have always responded better to me if I give them the why.
They do.
You might not like what I'm saying to you right now. However, this is why I'm saying it to you, and this is what we're going to get done.
I want HR to say it to you.
Yeah.
All right, there's the links. And my last piece is, I asked you to think a little bit about your leaders and what you bring with you. I think that some of the most important things that each one of us do as leaders, managers, supervisors, however you want to phrase yourself, is what you bring with you and how you use that to do your job effectively. I do not lead the same way as Shay. It's okay. I don't have to. I don't have to have all the same experience that Shay has had. We all have our own experience and we leverage that in different ways. And so I always make sure I know the me that I'm bringing with me. I'm aware of the problem with that and the benefit of that. So I've got 4 quotes up here that I think are pretty, to me, these are meaningful quotes. I've got a personal attachment to it. I'm going to see if any of you guys can figure out what that personal attachment could be. But these are things that mean something to me. When our team outgrows individual performance and learns team confidence, excellence becomes a reality. I've never worked on a team where individual performances meant that the whole team was successful. Today, you've got a decision to make. You're either going to get better, you're going to get worse, but you're not going to stay the same. Which will it be? We're not going to sit here and stay the same. You got to make a choice. We're going to get better. We're going to get worse. Your decision. It's just a rabbit trail thought. I worked at West Side Elementary for a little while, and in the staff bathroom, there was a behind the toilet, thing, and it said, "Make it a great day or not. The choice is yours." So true, right? Like you can have the worst day in the world, but if you got the right attitude, then it can be a good day. All right. You have to perform at a consistently higher level than others. That's the mark of a true professional. How are we striving to do something better Are we trying to make ourselves better every time? And then success without honor is an seasoned dish. It'll satisfy your hunger, but it won't taste very good. My favorite one of the four. Because I think integrity is about all we can carry with us in most cases. And it's a good reminder. So anybody know who said these? Same person said all four of them. Nope, wasn't Dimitri. All right, well, I am an alumni of Penn State, and this was Joe Paterno. Now, Joe had a questionable end to his career, some concerns about some stuff. So whatever we take from any of that, I learned some things from how that situation got handled, right? But he motivated young men for a long time. Any of y'all have experience raising young men that are between 18 and 25 years old?
Jesus.
Any of you say that they are intelligent, well-intentioned, and thoughtful human beings at that point in time? Or do they need some help?
Right.
I was a mess between 18 and 25, probably longer than that. I can remember the day I finally said to my mom, you were right and I'm sorry. And you know, it's like the light bulb finally comes on, some brain cells finally. But he led 18 to 25-year-old men, young men, in doing all this. And for the most part, kept them out of trouble. Had one of the highest academic averages during his coaching career of any school in the NCAA, and won a whole lot of football games. But he made a whole lot more men out of boys. And that's leadership to me. It's not just men into boys, but it's how are you making somebody better at the end of the day? So that's why those are meaningful to me. But I know that you guys know other leaders that have had similar quotes, have had similar stuff. He's not a rocket scientist, right? This is just how he said things. But how do you bring that to your work and the work that you do with that? So that is everything that I have to share with you today. You were an awesome class. Any closing thoughts? Yeah, I like all of them, or else I wouldn't have put them up there. But the success without honor one is just one I've known the whole time I've been a Penn State fan, and it's really kind of how the football team was made. Even if you go back towards when football teams were segregated and some of those kind of things, those were big deal at Penn State in the way that we basically said we ain't want to play you if we can't bring all of our players. We're a team,
Right.
and so all of those things I think actually hinge on how he felt about that box.
But we're going to get started because we're running behind, and I want to get everybody out of here by 1 o'clock.
I love your accent.
I know, it's like it does. It was so good that way.
People always tell you that.
We never expected that from you. I did not expect that.
So my name's Charlene Hutton. I am the supervisor for prevention. Anybody heard of prevention?
Yes.
No? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yes, I have.
So has anybody done mental health first aid?
Yeah.
Adverse childhood experiences,
Yeah.
Revive,
Yes.
yeah, Lock and Talk. Yeah, so we're responsible for some of that education that we bring into the communities. Anybody been to the coalition event yet?
No.
No, coalition? Yep, so we'll be talking about that a little bit later on as well. We just had one on Friday. We had like 65 people in the room next door in the community. So we'll be talking about that. All right, so I want to get you out of here. You've gone through this morning with Brandon. We're going to be changing up the vibe a little bit. So we're going to be looking at staff development, but we're going to be kind of turning the mirror around. So we're going to be doing a little bit of self-reflection as we go on through this next segment of the day. Reason being is because in order to understand others, we believe that you need to kind of understand yourself. So we're going to be doing a kind of a temperature check just to see where you're at as managers and supervisors. Are we managers or supervisors here? A mix? Okay. So we've been doing this now. This is the 5th and final cohort. We've already done 4 sessions. So we've had some interesting feedback. But like I say, we're going to be changing up the vibe a little bit. And it's going to be a bit more interactive. And in this portion of the training, we really want to hear from you. We really want to know about where you're at, how you're feeling, what's been going on for you, where your capacity's at, where your energy levels, burnout, that type of thing. And like I say, in order to serve your team better, to be a more effective manager or supervisor, we first have to make sure that your needs are being met as well. Okay. And then there'll be like a short break in between as well, and a few activities. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm tired today.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
Okay, so these are the key components for today's training. We're going to be looking at understanding self and staff, so capacity for growth. We're going to be looking at fostering a positive work culture. So we're going to be looking at the culture of the organization. We're going to be looking at networking skills, and at the end, something called principles over personalities. This is pretty much the meat of today's training. This second one here, and the last two are pretty straightforward. So there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of words. Some of the slides I'm going to be summarizing just so we can get through it. But don't worry, everything will be emailed to you so you can look through it again in detail, share it with your team, and some of the exercises that we're going to be doing today. Sound good? Okay, so it says here we all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve. Apparently, Bill Gates said that. Whatever you feel about Bill Gates, that's going better. Apparently, that's what he said. So this is what this is all about, right? So food for thought. Some of the things that we're going to present to you today is just to let it kind of sink in and just to get you thinking about things, okay? So feedback is really important. Without that, we don't know what's going on. We don't know where we stand. Has something ever been brought to you unexpectedly and everybody else knew and you felt like you were the last to know?
Yes.
All right, would it be helpful to get a bit of information or feedback prior?
Yes.
So like I say, the reason why this portion of the training has been put together is because we want to have feedback from you. Where are you at? How are you feeling? What's going on for you? As much as possible, I encourage you to be as honest as you can be. To not be afraid to divulge information and to just share where you guys are at, because that will help us to become a better organization. That will help us to help to improve the culture here at Western Tidewater. So before we get going, we're going to do a little capacity check-in. We're going to be looking at reality versus expectation. What do we think we're saying when we say reality versus expectation? What does that sound like?
Sometimes certain expectations are not realistic.
Exactly. Exactly. So we want to have an honest, open discussion. Realistically, how much are you able to give on any given day, right? So what I want you to think about is not just what your expectation of the role is, what your job description, what your duties are. I want you to think about you as a person. What do you have going on in your own lives? Right? Some of you are married, some of you have partners, some of you have children, some of you are caregivers. Like when you consider everything that you've got going on in your own world and what that looks like and the impact that might be having on you, and then when you get to work and then what that looks like, the challenges that you have to face, different projects that you're running, the program, the staff that you're responsible to. When you think about how many hats you have to wear in your own life and when you come to work, and then how much you get divided. So say if you have a team of 5 staff, each one of those staff is going to need something from you at any given moment. Then you'll have to do your reporting upwards, right? So realistically, how much do we have to give? Not what we think we're supposed to give, but where we're presently at. So I was going around earlier and I put a little piece of paper on your table. Some of you just share a marker pen, right? But I want you to treat this little paper like it's a scoreboard, right? A scorecard. So 0 is like, I've got nothing, right? I'm lucky I made it out of bed today, right? And say 10 is 100%, like you had your sleep, you had your vitamins, like you're just like on it. Where would you put yourself today? Like realistically, you can base it on today, you can base it on the week, you can base it on the month, the year so far, on average, what would you give yourself? Would it be a 3? Would it be a 7? Would it be a 10? Would it be a 1? Realistically, what do you have to give when you consider everything that you've got going on and then everything that's going on within your work life?
I know.
So put a big number on there between 0 and 10. Yes, I can see.
Oh,
And 10 is what?
10 would be like 100%. 0 would be nothing.
What do you say for today? Like today?
However you want to do it. It could be today, it could be how you've been feeling over the last week, over the last
I
month.
mean, any given Sunday. No, I mean,
Every day is different, right? Every day might be a better day, it could be a worse day. So just kind of think about that.
Of what we're getting with work.
So what you have to give in
Oh,
general.
what I have.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
oh, to everybody.
Yeah. Overall, when you think about everything that you do, who are you? Are you a parent? Do you have responsibilities? Your managers, supervisors? Where would you rate yourself between 0 and 10? Put a big number on that piece of paper. Don't overthink it too much.
take the whole word.
Only I'm seeing them. All right. Now I want you to hold up your scorecards, just so I can see them. Cool. So there's nothing that any of you have put on there that's unique. All right. Someone's got a 12. You're a 12?
At least.
At least.
Someone walking on air.
Sorry, I take that statement back. That is, I have not seen a 12 yet. Wow. I want whatever you have.
Exactly.
So yeah, I've seen 0s, I've seen 1s, I've seen 10s, right? It's just an observation. The idea is just to get you to be able to start try to be a little bit more transparent, right? Yeah. We are an organization for mental health.
Exactly.
Right? That's part of what we do here. It would be naive and ignorant to ignore ourselves in that, right? How are we doing? Where are we at? So if perhaps you put down a 5, well, what might your staff be going through? What might they be putting down? Because we often get work come down the chain when there's pressure above us, there's pressure on us, and then likelihood is that there's pressure below, right? So the idea is to get you to think about where you're at in order for you to start to be able to consider where anybody else might be at. Yeah? How well do you know your team? Do you know what's going on for them? Yeah? So that was just a little exercise to get you thinking. Could somebody read this for me, this little story here?
In a coffee shop, everyone was listening to a man who was shouting on his phone. Probably, oh, come on, you're the team lead. I mean, you tell me you can't mentor the guy. I took you for a born leader. Gosh darn it. A couple of taken away a woman, a sweet 60s, who lived in Congo, told her grandson, son, that man is wrong. Leaders aren't born for me.
All right. What do we think? We think that you're just born a leader and that's it, and it's just luck of the draw?
Both.
Or do you think that
There's ones that are made.
But sometimes your environment, even before you enter employment, forces you to be a leader, even if you don't want to be.
Oh, that's me.
Oh, yeah.
That's me.
what if your environment, you were born, say if you were intended to be a leader, but your environment was just such that your opportunity wasn't available to you? Has anybody in this room got to this present point in their life without any support? Without any information, education, assistance, support, mentorship, perhaps? So again, I'm just putting this out there. It's just to get you thinking. It's interesting because all the directors and admins said that they're bored. Right. That's interesting. Most of them were convinced that they were bored. I said, that's interesting. Next people. It's a challenge people. Really. Just taking my notes. Right.
Wow.
Okay, so what we're going to be looking at is this hierarchy of needs for management. Has everybody heard of Maslow's hierarchy?
Yes.
Yep. There's that theory that was established by Abraham Maslow back in like, I think, 30s or 40s to kind of figure out human motivation. Okay. So imagine a workplace where everyone did what you needed them to do without the need for money. Even better, picture employees doing these things because they genuinely want to, not because they have to. So it says motivation is arguably the most critical lever managers and leaders have for creating high performance. Good leaders and managers understand that to create high performing individuals and teams, they must attune to the human motivations of their people. So, motivation there says is a critical lever. How motivated are we feeling? How motivated are your team feeling? Yeah. So motivation. Has anybody been inspired to be motivated at any point? Yeah. 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 Does it improve your performance when you're feeling more motivated as opposed to when you're not feeling motivated? What does the day look like when you're feeling not motivated?
Take on the word.
Oh, when you're not motivated?
Oh, I didn't know you were motivated. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah.
You're a little slower.
Exactly.
Your
Tolerance level is lower.
Yeah. So it's important, right? Motivation is important. So it says if you're a manager or leader of people, then this theory will help you understand your employees' needs and provide you with a framework to help to motivate them. It says towards discretionary behavior. In other words, again, doing things because they want to, not just because they have to. The hierarchy illustrates an individual's inherent desire to be self-actualized. What does that mean? Self-actualized. So that would sit at the top of the hierarchy, but what is being self-actualized about? Any ideas?
Yeah, like being the best that you are in there. Yeah.
Basically, yeah, in a nutshell. Awareness, self-awareness, kind of know who you are, what you want, where you're kind of going. But you also to recognize areas of growth. Yeah. I don't know if Brandon, did you talk about SWOTs or SNOTs? Did you bring that up? Yeah. Okay. So our aim as managers should be to fulfill the needs of our people. We call it the secret sauce for motivation. So this is what that hierarchy would look like for management. At the very bottom there, we would have understanding individual needs, then prioritizing basic needs. We would look to foster a positive and inclusive culture. We want to provide recognition and feedback, support growth and development, empower and delegate, communicate clearly, and we'll talk about that. And then at the top, interestingly, we've got work-life balance, right? Did we talk about Jimmy Fallon earlier? With Brandon, Jimmy Fallon?
Yeah.
Not literally like Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, right.
Never taken any time off, no work balance.
Right.
There. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to break all of this down, see what each one includes. So number one, understand individual needs. Would somebody like to read this slide? Any volunteers?
Organizing regular one-on-one meetings, performance reviews of informal meetings to have leaders learn more about their team. Only by taking the time to understand their team, leaders can tell or their approach to meet those needs effectively.
Thank you.
Tell her.
That's all right. Thank you very much. All right, so individual needs. Again, I want you to think about this from your own perspective. If these things aren't happening for you, then there's an issue, right? Are there one-to-one meetings? Are you getting that? Are there regular meetings? Is it always scheduled? Are people asking you at any given point, how you doing? check-ins, temperature checks. Okay, understanding the team can help things to be more effective, more productivity. But once again, are your own individual needs being met? Okay. The second one was prioritizing basic needs. Would somebody like to read this one?
Meeting basic needs of individual team members in the workplace should be the bare minimum for leaders and managers. Ensure your staff have a comfortable work environment, adequate health and safety measures in place, competitive salaries and benefits.
Yep. So again, this is written for managers, supervisors, admin, and directors. Okay. So there's some things that we can't necessarily have the power over, but we can advocate and we have a voice. How do we use that? Do we feel that we can use it? Are we able to communicate? Do we feel safe to do that? Yeah. It says that having these basic needs met is the bare minimum. All right. For any organization, any grown-up company, that wants to have its place. Competitive salary and benefits. Okay. So why is the staff turnover so high? What is going on? Are these basic needs, these individual needs, are they actually even being met? Okay, because nothing's for nothing. Right. Right. So the third one says foster a positive and inclusive culture. It's an environment that values open communication, collabs, and the well-being and diversity can result in increased motivation and productivity. It says opportunities for collaboration, like teamwork, social interaction, like team building, and also being able to resolve conflicts swiftly and fairly can all contribute to a positive culture. People are more happier, the team's more motivated. So is that what we're experiencing? Do we feel here that we are fostering a positive and inclusive culture? Is that true for us? Why is it important to resolve conflicts swiftly and fairly? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Brandon touched on that a little bit. Yeah. Okay. The fourth one is provide recognition and feedback. So it says to meet self-actualization needs. And again, self-actualization would be at the top of the hierarchy. It says it's important to appreciate the achievements of your team, give feedback, and pray for a job well done. It's also important that leadership are aware of these achievements and credit is given where it's due. So, are you getting recognition and feedback? Are you being acknowledged for what you're doing? Can you then offer that to your team? Is there someone who's consistently showing up and doing an amazing job day in, day out? Has that been acknowledged? As we know, there's been an ambassador initiative that's been rolling out. Is there anybody on our teams that we would put forward? Or do we feel kind of like, well, I'm doing most of the work here and I'm not even getting recognition? Like, I have not been given any credit for doing all of my boss's work, right? What's going on? Where are we at? Yeah. And again, all of this is just to get you thinking about what is happening within your program in the organization as a whole. Number 5, support growth and development. So to support self-esteem and self-actualization needs, again, leaders and managers could regularly provide opportunities for growth and development to enhance the skills. That might look like training. So where is there a training opportunity? If we see someone is excelling in a particular area, would they benefit from going on a specific training? Would you benefit from going on a specific training? Maybe your supervisor would benefit from going on a specific training. How many people attend networking events? Does anybody represent the agency? Yeah. Mentorship opportunities. So that's highlighted because how many people here have ever been mentored? Okay. What was your experience like? Was it positive, negative?
I enjoyed mentoring.
You did?
Yeah, I used to mentor, mentoring program here, little girls ages 6 to 18. And it just feels good, especially since some of the girls I run into now, and they're grown and like they're doing good and they weren't in a good place.
Yeah.
When they're in the mentor.
Yeah, so it was a positive experience. we're going to touch on mentorship in a little while, but is there anybody here that feels that if the agency had some sort of mentorship program available, that would be very beneficial to them?
For employees?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. So I've asked that 4 times now, and everyone's pretty much said the same thing. So again, feedback, right? This is information that we can send up the chain. Number 6 in the pyramid, the hierarchy is empower and delegate. So giving staff members autonomy and control over their work increases motivation and self-esteem. So are we a micromanager, or do we feel confident in our team? Are we able to treat each individual on a case-by-case basis? Do we know how they work, where they're at, who can take on those responsibilities, and who do we need to kind of, keep an eye on a little bit and just do those follow-ups with? Am I speaking too quickly? I'm just trying. I don't want to keep you here after so delegating some of your important tasks to them can make your staff feel empowered and motivated. And again, like, if you see someone who's got that potential, could they be someone who's looking toward management, leadership? Or are you in a program with a team of people where you kind of feel a bit stuck, right? Like, I wish I could, but I can't. Or do you feel the control thing going on? Like, well, if I let go of this, is it going to be done to the standard that I like it to be done at? So there's always that. Or your staff might feel, well, I'm not doing anything more, right? It's above my pay grade.
Yes.
Right. You might feel like that.
Yeah.
And then get into the top now, communicate clearly. So obviously this one's quite important, hence the highlight and the underline. Communication is always key in leading teams. So being transparent. I created this training because I feel like this stuff that we're going to talk about today is really important. I feel like as an organisation, we need to be way more transparent with things that are going on in terms of culture, okay, mental health, burnout, capacity. But being transparent with your team about what's going on, goals, results, it helps them to feel involved, valued. It says staff members will have more trust. Now, notice the word trust. That's gonna come up a lot today. They'll have more trust and security, and again, increasing motivation in doing a great job. When we went through module 1, there was like talk about communications, but we're going to be looking at that in a slightly different way today, and that's towards the end. But how well do you feel the organisation does with communications? Of course. All right then, yes we are. Exactly. Yes. So encourage work-life balance. It's imperative for increased motivation. Do you feel like you have work-life balance? Yeah.
Sometimes.
Are you able to achieve that? Or does it feel like you've got your work phone on you even when you're not on the clock? Or are you able to be like, right, this is done, I'm not on the clock anymore, like my phone's to one side? Or are you the person on a Sunday evening checking emails or like whenever?
Yes, yes.
And sometimes it just depends on the program that you run, right? You might be in a 24/7, a residential, like everyone's doing something different. So I appreciate that it is different. But what does that look like for you? And what does that look like for your team? So things like flexible working where appropriate, regular breaks. Are you putting your hand up? Would you like to say something?
I'm actually reading a book. It's called Work-Life Balance in the World, and it's educating for, and I use it to my staff often, presidents on weekends and burnt out. And basically the premise of work-life harmony, well, work-life balance will make someone believe that in order to enjoy what you work, you also have to take the same amount of time to balance it out for life. So if I work an 8-hour shift, realistically, I don't have 8 hours to spend doing what I want to do. So then they introduce work-life harmony, which allows you to incorporate the things that you love and like to do in small increments so that you're still having the enjoyment of work. Like if I'm working on weight loss or fitness goals, maybe I can incorporate my work-life harmony by on my lunch break walking around the building.
as opposed to, working all day and trying to fit in me time or some can be. So it's actually just fitting in so they complement one another and harmonize as opposed to work life and so now that I've started incorporating that with my team, I feel a lot less resilience and rapid to like burn out and be tired because we're at CRC we're those hours, so it's just a lot. So that's really been helpful.
Thank you, that's great input. Yeah, so I like that, harmony. Maybe I'll change this slide, right? So harmony, so do we feel that we have that? Are we in a position where we can actually take our breaks? Or do we just like hammer through, next thing you know, it's 3:30, well, oh my goodness, I haven't even taken a lunch break. Are we stuck behind our laptop all day long? Do we have the ability to get up and walk around? Is that enough? So we don't want to be, taking a 5-minute smoke break every hour, like what Brandon said. But are there opportunities for breaks? Are we setting an example? It says that these things are becoming the bare minimum for modern grown-up companies. Okay. So looking out for your staff's well-being does help to prevent burnout, stress, and ultimately turnover. So that was the 8 points of the hierarchy of needs for management in a nutshell. Again, all of this is going to be sent out to you so you can overview it again or review it. Does that all make sense? Yeah? All right, let's move on. Touching on mentoring again, this just gives you kind of like a brief definition of what it is, the actual process of helping and guiding another person to support their personal development. Some of you have pointed out that it was beneficial, a positive experience, and most of you kind of agree it would be awesome to have that here. The thing with mentoring though is like, it's not necessarily appropriate for your direct supervisor to be your mentor. Why is that? Why is it not the best idea? Mm-hmm. Yep. Harmony. Conflict of interest. Especially if that person's the person who's causing you all the trouble in the world. You might need to go for mentoring to be able to cope. Right. So conflict of interest, there's things that you might want to talk about that just wouldn't be appropriate to speak with your direct supervisor. Well, does anybody understand the fine line or difference between mentoring and coaching? What might coaching look like? Is there a difference? What might it be?
I guess coaching is like goals and mentoring is more like reach your goals. Coaching.
I hear what you're saying. You're on the right line.
She just talked about losing weight. I want to lose 5 pounds, so my coach is going to help me.
Mm-hmm.
It's
more specific.
Results oriented. Mentor is going to, check in, make sure you're doing it.
Yeah. So a coach, they know they're kind of expert in whatever it is that you want to achieve. They know exactly how to achieve those results. If you look at it from a sports perspective, like a football coach, they know your stats, they know where you're at, they know what the goal is for the end of the season, and they give you a plan of action. This is exactly how we're going to get there. But with a mentor, it's more like a peer-led relationship almost. Somebody said last time that mentorship is just as good for the mentor as it is for the mentee in terms of what you get out of it. Okay. All right, so with all of this being said, we're going to do a little exercise. Has anybody heard of something called an executive skills questionnaire? Take some and pass them back. Awesome. So, understanding self in order to understand others. Read the instructions on the top of the sheet. Again, this is just a little questionnaire to help you to look at where your strengths are, where your weaknesses or needs or opportunities for growth, however you want to put it, might be. Follow the instructions. Add up your totals and then use the key on the opposite side to look to see what your core strengths or weaknesses are. I'll give you about 5 minutes
work through that. And anybody on Zoom, this will be sent out, as a PDF, so you can do it as well.
All right. Some of us finished? Yeah. So what was that like? Did we see what we expected to see? Were there some things that we were like, oh, okay. I thought that was a strength, but maybe not. Anything surprising or unsurprising? Anybody want to share some of their strengths or maybe areas for improvement? Not a test.
Let's see.
The strength would be the one.
What's it say on that? Yeah, the lowest scores will be the strengths.
C. I got a 3 on C.
You got a, what did you say, sorry?
I got a 3 on C. The one that I guess the one that said I get annoyed when tasks are too hard or confusing. Long time to complete. I don't.
Have you got everything up at the end? Did you do the key at the back?
Oh, I didn't. Okay, I got that.
So some things for me were like organization, pretty good. Yeah, that's good. And then I was like, time management, that's going to be great. No, it was not. It was actually weaknesses. I'm like, what? But yeah, right. I always say that I am that person, I'm that friend. You tell me that you need me there 2 hours before I actually need to be there, right? So this isn't this kind of like this isn't like this is who I am. No, it's just a tool that you can use to help you to see where you're at, perhaps. Some of it might be kind of accurate, some of it you might wholly disagree with. The questions are quite specific, right? And so you might have one area where you've scored really high on, but it might not pertain to something else. You might be really organized at work, but when you're at home, you just, whatever. So it is what it is. It's just a little question there, and it's something that you can take to your teams, right? So it's something that you can use as a team building exercise to see where your team might be at. You might get some interesting results. Something that we do in adverse childhood experiences, hence at the top it says ACE interface, right? So we do this in that training because we know that when someone faces adversity in their youth, it affects how they develop. All right, it can affect things like time management. It can affect things like being able to be organized. It can affect how the left and the right side of the brain actually communicate with each other. Okay, so yeah, just a little exercise. All right, let's see. Let's take. Let's take a 5-minute break. Yeah. Do you need a 5-minute break? Are you sure? Can't give you that. You can get that in an hour. You're gonna be done. I don't know if you technically you can't because it's not policy. So, is everybody happy to keep rolling?
Yes.
Feel free to use the restroom, obviously, take your comfort breaks. Coffee. I think there's still coffee going. Okay, so now we're going to look at fostering positive work cultures and environments. So this is where it gets pretty wordy. Okay, so I will summarize a lot of these slides for sake of time. Remember this one from the hierarchy, number 3? It talked about fostering a positive and inclusive culture. We talked about resolving conflicts quickly, and we talked about why a positive and inclusive culture is important for motivation and productivity. So I want to talk about culture for a second, okay? It says culture is traditionally defined as beliefs and behaviors that are passed down from generation to generation.
So within an organization, each new employee kind of is like representing a generation. So this could be potentially a double-edged knife because employees are likely to adopt behaviors of their co-workers, both positive and negative. It says staff often work by example. So culture within any environment is usually defined by those who have the most influence or authority. And you can put that within the environment of anywhere. It doesn't have to be work, it could be a family unit, it could be any environment. So it says typically the culture that sits atop of any organization is generally the culture that is experienced throughout. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the culture? And is it what we're seeing? Right? So again, food for thought. What is the culture? What's the culture of your own team? What's the culture of the organization? Okay. We're going to look at 5 common dysfunctions of a team. It says maybe you've been part of a group of talented people that never seem to reach its potential. Perhaps you've been in a team where everybody seems to have a strong opinion, but there's always a failure to reach a consensus. Conversely, you may have been part of a less talented team that unexpectedly achieved great things. It says behind these conundrums often lie hidden dysfunctions. They're subtle and often insidious, and if left unaddressed, it can take a massive toll on productivity and morale. That's a big thing too, right? Morale. So by us understanding and addressing some of these dysfunctions, we can then empower our team and then we can reach new heights of success. So let's look at some of these 5 dysfunctions. The first one is the absence of trust. We call this the foundation dysfunction. There's trust is the bedrock of a high-performing team. When it's absent, members are likely to conceal weaknesses and mistakes. They might be hesitant to ask for assistance. They could make assumptions. It says, in the most destructive form, a lack of trust can make team members fear that others will use their admissions against them or maybe view them as less confident. As a result, they might not choose to ask for help when they actually need it. And again, that will hinder performance. It says, perhaps more worryingly, people who lack trust conceal weaknesses, which can prove truly dangerous in some situations. So, who are the clients that you serve? What's the nature of your program? What's going on there? A lack of trust can lead to a toxic work environment where team members prioritize personal status over the progress of collective goals. And again, that diminishes the combined success. So that's the first one, absence of trust. Remember I said earlier, we were going to talk about trust, pretty much runs throughout all of these dysfunctions. Any thoughts on that one? Does it make sense? Yeah. Dysfunction 2, we've got fear of conflict. We say this is hindering productive discussions. So healthy conflict, not just conflict, healthy conflict is crucial for a team's success because it fosters productive discussions, improves decision making, and ensures that team members are held accountable for their actions. However, when teams are plagued by fear of conflict, they avoid addressing pressing issues and engaging in constructive debates. So, is there artificial harmony? Okay, what does that mean? Are we kind of ignoring the elephant in the room? We just kind of forget about it? I've had 3 emails now from the same person saying the same thing. What am I going to do about it? And then when we meet, is it just a pleasant icebreaker and isn't it great? And what did you do this weekend? Or whatever. It says, the desire to prioritize artificial harmony significantly impacts the team because critical topics remain unaddressed, innovation is stifled, and resentment and tension quietly build. The result is that decision making is hindered, the team's ability to adapt and grow is compromised, and then again, the team doesn't reach its full potential. So how do we handle conflict? Do we know how to handle conflict? Do we even have the tools to do that? Are we able to address this? Do we feel safe enough to address it? Can we take this information to our supervisor? Do we feel it will be heard? Or do we not have the confidence? Again, this is all kind of like self. Us as a whole, where are we at? Dysfunction 3 talks about lack of commitment. We call this the detachment dilemma. So a team's success is contingent upon the commitment of its members and to goals and decisions. When we lack commitment, we may become detached and unproductive. It says lack of commitment arises when there's ambiguity around decisions and direction. It could be because of a lack of clarity or a lack of buy-in. We become resistant or hesitant to kind of like say what's our opinion, what's going on. We might not feel that we can fully support decisions. So the impact of this dysfunction on teams is profound. Without solid commitment, teams often experience missed opportunities, inconsistent execution, a lack of alignment, and then again, it's ultimately going to affect that team success and momentum. So lack of commitment. The fourth one is avoidance of accountability. We call this the downfall of standards. So it's a critical component for high-performing teams. Avoiding interpersonal discomfort makes us reluctant to address actions and behaviours that could be detrimental to the team. Unfortunately, a lack of accountability can lead to a decline in standards, poor performance, and overall a deterioration of a team's success and the organisation at large, right? So all of this is applicable from the very top right all the way through. Again, you can probably apply this in any kind of environment. And then the fifth dysfunction is inattention to results. We're talking about personal versus collective success. It says this manifests when team members place their personal goals and achievements ahead of the team's or the organization's collective success. The impact is significant because we become fragmented. There's no cohesion, the team deteriorates, again, the trust, right? And performance ultimately drops. So instead of rallying together for shared success, members become more self-oriented, and it can lead to a diluted sense of purpose and missed opportunities. So these are kind of like the 5 common dysfunctions that we see in organizations and teams, wherever. Did all of those kind of make sense? Could we kind of resonate with any of those? Spot some of that, perhaps? So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to look at how to overcome them. So we talked about trust on the first one, and obviously the first one has to be building trust. Actively fostering trust is essential for overcoming the first dysfunction. So we can do trust building exercises, focus on understanding and appreciating your staff, your colleagues, knowing what their behavioural preferences are, knowing a bit about their personality. That can help to develop stronger relationships and improve teamwork. Okay. But again, I will remind you all of this. How do you feel? You know, do you feel that you have that? Do you feel that you can actually speak freely? Is there trust? Some exercises that you can use to build trust. So team effectiveness exercises is where each member identifies the strengths of another team member, what's beneficial, also what's not so beneficial. How that's done is very important. Okay. You can do personality and behavioural preference profiles, a bit like the questionnaire that you just did. Yeah, I think Brandon has some tools as well. And then you have things like team building exercises. What does that look like? Have you ever done it before? Have you been part of team building? What are your thoughts on it? Do you enjoy it? Is it not for you? Do you love it? Like, yeah, absolutely. I'll see you at Top Golf. Or are you like, if this is after 5 o'clock, I'm not going to be there. Right. Are you like, I don't associate with my colleagues outside of work, like not for me? Or do you love it? Or axe throwing, perhaps? Mm-hmm. Again, what does that look like? Is it effective? We can do these things, but if no one on the team, if it's not part of their kind of like personality profile and they're not interested, then it's kind of a wasted effort. What else might we do? Okay. It says, as a leader, you've got to encourage team members to be open and don't forget the role that you play. So as a leader, you've got to demonstrate some vulnerability. You've got to be open and try to create an atmosphere where members feel comfortable with sharing their thoughts and ideas. Because people can see, right? People will see how comfortable you are. People are able to see if you're trustworthy. You're able to see the same, right? Emotional intelligence skills is a great place to start as a leader. What does that even mean, emotional intelligence? Any ideas?
How you react to situations, that's being in charge of your emotions and not reacting to them.
Mhm.
I think it's reacting to your emotions. Yeah,
Mhm.
respond to the situation differently.
Yep. Bit like when we look at personalities and principles a bit later on, like how well do we know ourselves? Am I just going to jump on the laptop and send that email impulsively? Just go for it? Or are we able to be measured? Can we take, when we know that we're like, say we're coming in on a 2, I've got a 2 today, right? That's probably going to impact my tolerance for certain things throughout the day. Like, what's my stress level at? Where am I at? Let me make sure I take my breaks today. Let me make sure that I pause. If I see something come through and I kind of have a reaction to it, let me just take that minute before I just go for it. Yeah. Again, it's part of communication, but emotional intelligence. And then when you do need to communicate, what does that even look like? The thing about emails and texts and things like that is that there's no tone, you can't read between them. So you've got to be kind of like really clear and professional with that communication. Or is it clearly passive aggressive? Is every sentence got like 3 exclamation marks after it?
All caps.
All caps, there you go. Yeah. All right. So instead of the fear of conflict, we're going to embrace healthy conflict. It says teams must obviously establish trust, create an environment where members feel comfortable to express opinions and ideas. Once this is established, members feel safe engaging in conflict mediation. It means that they feel open to express differing opinions. We can disagree, we can agree to disagree perhaps. Is that possible? And engage in solution finding, knowing that there isn't going to be any kind of like personal attacks afterwards or punitive action. A lot of the times we don't say how we feel, we don't speak up, we feel that we can't because we are fearful, because perhaps there is that lack of trust. We've got 5 points here of how you can mediate conflict. So mining for conflict. So being vigilant for disagreements. What's lurking passively in the team? And then how do we deal with this? How do we foster honest debate if we do find that there's something lurking? Real-time permission. So if we see that someone's never really speaking, they're always holding back, when you're doing a meeting, the camera's always off, they're not engaging, right? Perhaps we just need to actually invite them, give them that permission to actually speak. Perhaps you might arrange a meeting with them on a one-to-one informal meeting, a temperature check. Where are you at? Clarify what is acceptable behavior. So establishing those guidelines. Post-conflict follow-up. So if there has been a conflict, what then happens after that? Is it just, that's it, it's done, forget about it? Do we take the time to follow up with those individuals just to make sure that there's nothing lingering? Is it worth just having that, hey, how are you doing today? I know that last week was really challenging. Are you getting those things yourselves? Yeah. Sometimes they say you can't give what you don't have. And then regular reviews. Are we doing them? Like, do we kind of like check in as a team? Like, where are we at? What are we doing? How are we feeling? Or do we just kind of like go through and next thing we know, it's a new year? Again, I'm summarizing all of this is available to you. It says leaders should model appropriate conflict resolution behavior. When people see leaders engaging in constructive disagreement and debate, when necessary, and focused on the greater goal, not personalities, they'll recognize it as a beneficial skill to have as a manager. So we want to try to cultivate an environment, an atmosphere where there's healthy communication. So much of it is not necessarily what you say, it's kind of how it's said, right? And then sometimes, even then, it doesn't matter what you say sometimes, it's just how that person receives it. In that sense, I guess we're kind of powerless. But at least we can make sure that we're doing our part on our end. Okay, so how to overcome the third dysfunction. So strengthening commitment. So addressing the actual dysfunction. I'm going to jump to the second bit there. It says team commitment is like glue. It bonds the members together and helps to hold everyone accountable. Without it, things fall apart like a house of cards. So sometimes when teams don't commit to decisions, it could be from a lack of clarity or buy-in, or sometimes it's just because people are actually at their full capacity, right? Like, I'm just not that enthusiastic today. Like, it's not that I'm not hearing you, like, I hear it, but like, we've got all of this work to do. Perhaps we don't have enough staff members available, right? You might feel that you're at your workload capacity. Again, some exercises that you can use. So making sure that everyone is clear on the decisions that have been set, and if not, why. Creating deadlines for decisions. Worst case scenario analysis. So what would happen if? Is that in place? Again, depending on what you do and the program you work in. So use of objectives and standard operating procedures. And then commitment to clarification. So when you do have a meeting, or when you have met with somebody and actions have been assigned or whatever, is there any kind of like, right, this is what we're doing. So just to clarify, this, and this needs to be achieved. Or is there the assumption, they've heard me, I'm not going over it again, it is what it is.
Well, and that's a really good point, because one of the things I find is I think I'm clear in my communication, but what they hear, because they've got all that other stuff going on in their minds as well. And so a lot of times I'll just, bullet maybe an email to them, or I'll ask them to bullet an email to me of what they thought I heard, or even right there in the moment say, please tell me what you heard me say.
Yep.
And because it can be so,
Yep, definitely.
on both sides.
Yep. So how do you do your supervisions? What does that look like? Are we using a kind of Teams preference? Or actually having it there? Are we using just documents and we're having those sent and emailed? Like, how does that look? When I'm on supervision with my supervisor, so I always clarify at the end, so this is what the actions are, right? And when I'm working with my team, I say, this is what we're doing. I'm quite lucky in prevention in the sense of the type of work that we do. We have logic models, we have like contract performance plans. I have to know what we've done at the end of each quarter, at the end of every 6 months, first year, second year, 5 years. All that reporting has to be done. So I share that with the team, right? Let's do a quarterly check-in. This is what we've achieved, this is what we haven't achieved, this is what we did well, we didn't do this so well. Do we need to revisit that, or should we just kind of like stop doing that and try something better? So just that kind of communication, that everyone's on the same page. And again, I know everyone does something different. So how can you model it to suit your program? And again, looking at, no, not again, this is number 4. It's on the same screen. So enhancing accountability. So some approaches and exercises. Clear commitments. Again, what I've just said, how do we do things at the end of the meetings? Does everybody know what their commitments are? Progress reviews, we've talked about that. Check-ins. Team goals and standards. And again, I've just mentioned that. Is everybody clear on what it is that we're doing, what the expectation is? How many clients do we need to bring in? How many beds are available? What's going on? And then, are there consequences for not delivering? In other words, what would it look like if this doesn't happen? How does that impact the program? How does that impact us? Okay. Is there going to be a missed opportunity? And then the last one, number 5, prioritizing team results. Okay, this is how you overcome that 5th dysfunction. And again, it looks like reviewing goals and progress. And then, like, how do we celebrate things that we've done well? How do we celebrate collective wins? What does that look like? Do we even acknowledge it? Do we just roll on to the next? Do we pause to give ourselves a little bit of like kudos? Yeah. Scoreboards, progress boards, again, is that appropriate for what you do? Is it not? How would you implement something like that? And then post-mortem reviews, a bit like what I've been discussing. So after a project or a quarter, do you do a review? Do you discuss what went well, what didn't go so well? if there's an incident, how did this happen? Was everything put in place that could have prevented this? And it just happened, or was there something that we dropped the ball on? Yeah. How can we improve on that? Okay. So we had the 5 dysfunctions, and then we've looked at the 5 ways to overcome them. All right. Again, all of this will be sent to you. Are we good? Yeah. That all kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. That's good, because that was the big chunk of today, right? So we're going to roll on into the 3rd segment, which is networking skills. So, did anybody say earlier that they are representing the agency? Anybody do any networking? Anyone has to go out and talk about Western Tidewater or what they do? Anybody do community outreach? Partner with different organizations? Yeah.
I do. I'm in this state hospital discharge planner, so I often work with the other hospitals.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So networking skills. It's good to be able to go somewhere to an event if you have to, or be able to represent yourself and the organization effectively. By doing that, sometimes we use a technique called an elevator pitch. Does anybody have any ideas, or does anybody know what we might be referring to when we say an elevator pitch?
It's like a 30-second speech that you're selling a program or you're selling. Yeah.
Yep, that's it. This is quite long, 2 minutes here. This is a very long elevator ride. If you're in New York, perhaps. Right? So the idea is that if you were on an elevator with somebody, you met them, and you had as long as it took to get to your floor, would you be able to let that person know who you are, what you do, who you work for? Would they know how to contact you? Would there be a call to action? Would you be able to get that information out in a short amount of time effectively? Right? Yeah? Well, do you want to have a go at doing it?
What you want me to do about it?
Right, okay, so that's the next bit now. We're going to do this little activity, and I'm glad that you're kind of willing. So, you got up to 2 minutes to say who you are, what you do at Western Tidewater, give information about that, and then these are just bullet points of what you might need. So if you were going to an event, do you have information about the event? Do you know who's attending? If you're looking to network with key partners, do you have an invite list prior? So if I'm looking to work with prevention at Hampton Newport News CSB, because we want to do like a collaboration event, do I know who heads prevention there? Do I have their contact information? What is the objective, right? Do you have handouts with you? Do you have business cards? Do you have brochures? Do you have information on your program available that person that you've networked with would know how to contact you afterwards? All right, so these are kind of like the basic checkpoints if you're going out and representing the organization.
I think we've done this before at the Hilton for Western Tidewater. We had an event and we had the popcorn and all the stuff out for the community, but we had to pitch different programs and bring flyers and hand them out. So
Yep. So remember the coalition that I mentioned earlier? So this is a feature that we do, right? So prevention, we have created a Western Tidewater CSB new community coalition. The idea is that we're inviting not just partners, but actual community members. So members of the public, we're providing the space. And the idea is that, hey, what's happening in the community? What challenges are you facing? What services do you need? What needs do you have? And then we have our partners, and they say, transportation, is that what you're looking for? Well, here you go. Now you can connect and get those needs met directly on the day, right? So we've been doing that. We've had about 3 now. We have them every other month, and we hold them next door. The next one's June 21st. But when we're in there, we do this. We allocate about 20 to 30 minutes for people to stand up, and we literally put a timer up. It's quite fun. And anybody that's there in attendance, it could be a community member. We had somebody there talking about their children and how much they had benefited from the SKIP program. Yeah. We have sorority members, we have church members, we have all different types of people come, and we have different businesses there. And then you get your 2 minutes to say who you are, what you do, And then people can network, right? Oh, I need that service. Let me speak to you now. So that's the point. Would you like to give it a go? A little practice? Yeah? Awesome. All right.
Does that have to be 2 minutes?
No, you can be 10 seconds.
Oh, give me 10 seconds?
Yeah, 10 seconds. Maybe you're getting up on the first floor. Who knows?
So I gotta come up there and do it from here.
You can sit right there if you want to.
Hi, my name is Crystal Honsky. I'm an operations supervisor here at Western Power Water. I also oversee the transportation department. As far as transportation, we usually provide transportation for all Western Power Water Day program, and we're getting revved up to provide individual transportation trips to individuals that have appointments and visits. For the operational aspect of it, I oversee all of the programs that Latrell Mariano oversees and helps her handle all the day-to-day operation things, especially with programs like ACT, which is the Serve Community Treatment Team that provides wraparound services to severely mentally ill members, usually homeless in the community, and we do a lot of great things for them.
All right. Great. That was great. That was like 45 seconds. That was brilliant. Perfect. Anybody else want to give it a go? A little practice? One more? We'll have one more before we wrap up. I know somebody kind of wants to give it a go.
Practice, if you practice that kind of often, you really find out how much stuff you do kind of know as quickly as trying to get around some.
Anybody else? Anybody feeling right? I'll take that as a no. All right, but that's that, right? So just touching a little bit on networking skills, looking at that kind of elevator pitch. Can you kind of sell yourself basically in terms of like, can you get across what it is that you do effectively and quickly? Yep. You don't want to stand there forever. People will forget. Right? Absolutely. I have people come up to me like, oh, I met you at the coalition or I met you here. I'm like, I don't remember. All right. Okay. So good. We got through that quickly. Okay. So this brings us to the fourth and final segment for today. We're looking at communications principles over personalities. And I'm going to ask, what do we think we're getting at when we say that? Principles over personalities. Any ideas?
Could it be like the way things are supposed, the principle of way things are supposed to be, and how we personally feel like they're supposed to be? So
Kind of, yeah, on the right line, I'd say, getting there.
Or maybe putting principles over the personalities of his staff.
Yep, pretty much. So, in a nutshell, it means that we try to practice honesty, humility, compassion, tolerance, and patience with everyone. Yes, everyone. Whether we like or agree with them or not. Yeah. It says putting principles before personalities teaches us to treat everyone equally. And again, Brandon touched on that earlier on. I really love this member of staff. They're amazing. They're perfect. They do everything great. This one, not so much, right? How am I going to respond? Am I going to be fair? Is there going to be like equality there? Or am I going to let that person know, like, I'm really just, no, I'm not approving your vacation, right? What's going on? So we try to, as much as we can, practice these principles above whatever personalities that we may disagree with. It's really hard. It's hard, right? In execution, it can be quite challenging.
Next time.
Yeah. Yep. And again, that's where some of that emotional intelligence comes into play.
Yes.
So I might have a certain thought or feeling about something or someone, but at the end of the day, like, I have to remain professional. Yeah. How am I going to be in my communications? Am I going to be lured into the copier room where the gossip is? Right? Am I going to be part of that? Doesn't make you feel very good. Yeah. It's the golden rule, right? How would you want to be treated? It's again very simple, but really hard to execute sometimes. But when you are able to practice these things, you feel so much better because you can just, like, your conscience is clear. Yeah. Drama free. It says the most effective leaders are not brokers of scarcity, nor do they play zero-sum games. Right? So I have to lead by fear in order to be effective. No. Right? In order for me to succeed, somehow somebody has to lose. Yeah. In order for me to be seen, I have to block you. In order for me to feel bigger, you have to now be smaller. Right? So the most effective leaders, they don't deal with that. The perception that we are separate and independent, always siloed, that our interests are pitted against one another, that one side of the ship can sink while the other side stays afloat, is a fundamental mistake in understanding the way in which this agency, society, and the world at whole works. Yeah. Fundamental mistake. So those questions I asked earlier, where are we at? Do we feel safe enough to express what's going on? Is there transparency? Is there trust? Yeah. Again, it's a temperature check on the culture. Remember, communication is key, right? It's right up there in that hierarchy. Number 7, at least. So, just to wrap up then, the last thing I'm going to touch on very quickly is just some effective communication skills. So, ability to adapt your communication style. We've looked at that, right? I'm not necessarily going to talk to this person the way I might talk to that person because they're two different individuals. What's active listening?
Listening to hear, not to respond.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. So if I'm like, what? Hang on, one second. Yeah.
Yeah.
Swinging on my chair, rolling my eyes. Yeah. On the Zoom meeting, the camera's just right. That's good. I don't really know if that person's there or not. I kind of hope it's so, but I don't really know. It's almost like just kind of respectful, right? Transparency, we talked about that. Clarity, we touched on that. Ability to ask open-ended questions. What's an open-ended question? What do we mean when we're saying this?
Requires more than you
Yes or no.
You have to elaborate on that a little bit.
Right. Have we heard of motivational interviewing? Yeah. Empathy. To receive empathy. It's like, no, not all.
Yeah.
Right? Again, it's hard to give what you don't have. Do you have self-compassion, even? You've got to kind of love yourself, even if somebody else won't, right? Open body language. So, how do we communicate mostly? Body language. I think it's like 90% or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
So, again, what I say in my email or what I say, but again, if I'm just like, oh, rolling my eyes, yeah, checked out, that's going to say more, isn't it? And then again, we talked on receiving and implementing feedback. So feedback's all well and good, but if it's just going to sit in a file in a cabinet somewhere, it's pretty pointless, right? What do we do with that? How do we take that and then implement it to make things better, more effective, more healthier? And that brings us to the end. All right. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any comments, feedback, questions, anything that you'd like to share? We finished in a great. I think this is the record so far. It's the record. Yeah, it's the earliest that we finished.
Good job. I think this was awesome.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to, evaluate individual evaluation of your management style and how you may be affecting others. It also made me think of like, not just the individuals we serve. Sometimes you have employees or we are employees with certain mental health struggles or struggles ourselves. And I forgot, what's the thing that we had up there with, oh my God, I forgot already, so I'm glad you're gonna put this on there for that. Where you could actually sit back and look and be like, am I being this type of, am I showing empathy? Am I being considerate enough? Not being too soft, following the policies and procedures, but just being considerate of your communication with your staff.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Anybody, anything else? We good? Yeah. Everybody on the roster?
Yes.
All right. So as I said, the slides will be sent to you. The exec questionnaire will be sent to you. If you have any feedback, stick it on the email, send it to us, let us know. How can we improve? Your number ones if you want to share that. And yeah, 20 minutes to go. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you guys.